Hey guys, tonight we begin a journey through one of the strangest revolutions in human history. A revolution that didn't start with guns or governments, but with a 5-cent hamburger sold from a tiny white building in Kansas. Tonight, we're going back to 1921, to a time when eating a hamburger was considered dangerous, even disgusting. We're going to discover how two men changed the way an entire nation ate, how they turned suspicion into trust, and how they accidentally created something that would eventually take over every street corner in America. This is the story of the very first fast food restaurant, and trust me, it's nothing like what you think. So before we dive deep into this strange and fascinating tale, I'd love it if you could take just a moment to subscribe to the channel and hit that like button, but only if tonight's story truly resonates with you. And hey, I'm curious, where are you right now? Are you in bed on a late night drive or maybe walking under the stars? Drop a comment and let me know where in the world you're listening from. I read every single one. Now, dim those lights, get comfortable, maybe turn on a fan for that gentle background hum, and let's travel back in time together. Picture this. It's the spring of 1921. Wichita, Kansas. A small city on the Great Plains where cattle ranches stretch for miles and the wind never seems to stop blowing. The streets are dusty. Model T Fords rumble past wooden storefronts, and on a corner lot something unusual is being built. It's small, maybe only 15 feet wide. The walls are made of white porcelain-coated steel panels that gleam in the sunlight. It looks like a tiny castle. In fact, that's exactly what it's supposed to look like. This is White Castle, and it's about to change everything. But to understand why this little white building mattered so much, we need to go back a bit further, because in 1921 most Americans were terrified of hamburgers. Not uncomfortable, not hesitant, terrified, and they had good reason to be. 15 years earlier, a man named Upton Sinclair had published a book called The Jungle. It was meant to expose the horrible working conditions in Chicago's meatpacking plants. But what Americans remembered wasn't the workers, it was the meat. Sinclair described diseased cattle, rats running across piles of ground beef, workers with tuberculosis coughing over the food, and meat so rotten it had to be treated with chemicals just to hide the smell. The book became a sensation. People stopped eating hamburgers almost overnight. Ground meat became associated with poverty, filth, and sickness. If you ate a hamburger in 1921, people looked at you like you were taking your life into your own hands. This is where our two heroes enter the story. The first is Walt Anderson. He's a short, quiet man with a thick moustache and calloused hands. He's been cooking hamburgers since 1916. Flipping them on a small griddle at various food stands around Wichita. Walt is obsessed with cleanliness. Obsessed. He wears a spotless white uniform. He scrubs his griddle until it shines. He's convinced that if people could just see how clean his operation is, they'd trust hamburgers again. But there's a problem. Walt is a cook, not a businessman. He knows how to make a great burger, but he doesn't know how to scale it. How to turn his small operation into something bigger. That's where Billy Ingram comes in. Billy is a real estate agent, sharp-dressed and smooth-talking, the kind of guy who could sell ice to an Eskimo, as they used to say. He meets Walt in 1921, and something clicks. Walt has the product. Billy has the vision. Together, they're going to do something nobody has ever done before. They're going to take the hamburger, that suspicious, low-class food that respectable people won't touch, and turn it into a symbol of cleanliness, efficiency, and modernity. So they open the first White Castle on a warm day in March of 1921, and everything about it is designed to send one message: trust us. The building itself is white, gleaming white, because white means clean. The walls are made of porcelain steel, smooth and spotless, because they want customers to see that nothing dirty can hide here. There are big windows too, so you can watch the cooks work. You can see every burger being made, every bun being toasted, every onion being sliced. Nothing is hidden. The cooks wear white uniforms and white paper hats. Everything gleams under bright electric lights. It's almost surgical, this level of cleanliness, and that's exactly the point. But here's the really clever part. Walt Anderson doesn't just cook hamburgers, he engineers them. He takes a ball of fresh ground beef, weighs it precisely, then smashes it flat on the griddle with a spatula. He presses it down hard, creating a thin, square patty with crispy edges. Then he pokes 5 holes in it. Why 5 holes? Because they allow the heat to cook the burger faster and more evenly. He places the patty on a bed of onions, and the steam from those onions cooks the burger from above while the griddle cooks it from below. The smell is incredible. Sweet, savoury, almost caramelized, and it's fast. Walt can cook a burger in less than a minute. He puts it on a small square bun, adds a pickle, and wraps it in white paper. Clean, simple, perfect. And the price? 5 cents, a nickel. At a time when most restaurant meals cost 50 cents or more, you could walk up to White Castle and buy a hamburger for the price of a newspaper. This wasn't just affordable, this was revolutionary. Suddenly, working-class families, factory workers, travelling salesmen, even children with pocket money could afford to eat out. The hamburger wasn't elite food, it was democratic food. Food for everyone. The response was slow at first. People were suspicious. Some walked past without stopping, peering through the windows but not going in. Others made jokes. A hamburger castle? Really? But Walt and Billy didn't give up. They placed ads in the local newspaper with the slogan, "Buy 'em by the sack." They encouraged people to buy 5 or 10 at a time, to take them home, to share them with friends, and slowly, gradually, people started to trust. They could see the cleanliness, they could see the process, they could taste the quality. And most importantly, they didn't get sick. No one ever got sick from a White Castle hamburger. By 1924, just 3 years later, White Castle had opened locations in other cities: Omaha, Kansas City, St. Louis. And then the real boom began. Billy Ingram proved to be a genius at expansion. He didn't just open restaurants, he built a system. He created a commissary to supply fresh beef and buns to every location. He wrote an operations manual, one of the first in restaurant history, that specified exactly how every burger should be made, how every employee should dress, how every building should be cleaned. Nothing was left to chance. Every White Castle was identical. If you ate a burger in Wichita, it tasted exactly the same as a burger in Cincinnati. This was consistency on a scale no one had ever seen before. And here's something fascinating that most people don't know. Billy Ingram invented the carry-out meal. Before White Castle, restaurants were sit-down affairs. You went in, you sat at a table, you were served by a waiter, and you ate there. The idea of taking food to go, of eating it in your car or at home, didn't really exist. But White Castle changed that. They gave you your burgers in a white paper sack. You could order 10 burgers, walk out the door and eat them wherever you wanted. This was food designed for a modern, mobile America. Food for people who didn't have time to sit down. Food for people on the move. By 1933, just 12 years after that first location opened, White Castle had over 100 restaurants across the United States. They were selling millions of hamburgers every year. And they had done something incredible. They had rehabilitated the reputation of the hamburger. They had taken a food that people associated with disease and poverty and turned it into a symbol of American ingenuity and progress. They had proven that fast food, if done right, could be clean, could be affordable, and could be trusted. But there's a deeper story here, something more psychological. White Castle didn't just sell hamburgers. They sold a feeling, the feeling of being modern. Think about it. In 1921, America was changing fast. Cars were becoming common, cities were growing, people were moving away from farms and into factories. Life was speeding up. And White Castle was part of that speed. You didn't have to sit down for an hour-long meal like your grandparents did. You could walk up to a window, get a burger in 2 minutes and be on your way. It felt efficient, it felt new, it felt American. There's something almost poetic about eating standing up, don't you think? For thousands of years, sharing a meal meant sitting together, slowing down, connecting. But White Castle asked a different question. What if eating wasn't about connection? What if it was about convenience? What if a meal could be just fuel, something you consumed quickly so you could get back to work, back to your life, back to whatever mattered more than food? This was a radical idea, and America loved it. The success of White Castle also revealed something about human psychology that we still see today. We crave consistency. We want to know what we're getting. When you walked into a White Castle in 1925, you knew exactly what to expect. The same white building, the same uniform, the same burger, the same taste. There was comfort in that predictability. In a rapidly changing world, White Castle was a constant, and that consistency created loyalty. People didn't just eat at White Castle. They became what Billy Ingram called cravers. They craved those little square burgers with the onions and the pickles. They craved the experience. Some people would drive across town just to get their fix. But here's the thing that really gets me. Walt Anderson and Billy Ingram probably had no idea what they were starting. They thought they were just selling hamburgers. They didn't realize they were creating a template that would be copied thousands of times. They didn't know that their little White Castle in Wichita would inspire McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, and every other fast food chain that followed. They were just two guys trying to make a living, trying to convince Americans that hamburgers weren't dangerous. But what they actually did was invent an entirely new way of eating. They invented fast food, and there's something bittersweet about that, isn't there? Because today we know how the story ends. We know that the convenience of fast food came with costs, health costs, cultural costs, the loss of family dinners and home cooking. But in 1921, none of that was visible yet. In 1921, White Castle was just a bright, clean little building, selling 5-cent hamburgers to people who were tired and hungry and didn't have much money. It was hope served on a bun. It was the American dream, small and square and wrapped in white paper. So as we close this first chapter, I want you to think about that original White Castle in Wichita. Think about Walt Anderson in his white uniform, carefully pressing those burgers on the griddle. Think about Billy Ingram watching the crowds grow, dreaming of expansion. They couldn't have known what they were creating. They couldn't have imagined that their innovation would spread to every corner of the globe, that billions of people would grow up eating fast food, that their little idea would become one of the most powerful forces shaping modern life. They were just trying to sell hamburgers, and they succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. But the story doesn't end with White Castle, because just 19 years later, in 1948, two brothers in California would take White Castle's ideas and transform them into something even more revolutionary. They would bring the assembly line, the very symbol of American industry, into the kitchen. They would create a system so efficient, so profitable, that it would make White Castle look quaint by comparison. And that system would launch the golden age of fast food, changing not just what we eat, but who we are. That's where we're headed next. We're now traveling west across the desert to a place where Hollywood dreams and car culture collide. Southern California, 1948. The war is over. America is booming, and in a dusty little city called San Bernardino, two brothers are about to do something that will seem absolutely crazy to everyone who knows them. They are going to close down their successful restaurant, fire all their employees, and start over from scratch. and in doing so they'll accidentally invent the modern world. Let me tell you about Dick and Mac McDonald. They're not visionaries, they're not dreamers, they're just two practical guys from New Hampshire who moved to California looking for opportunity. They tried the movie business first and failed miserably. Then they opened a hot dog stand. That did okay, and then in 1940 they opened a drive-in restaurant in San Bernardino. A proper one, with car hops on roller skates, a menu with 25 items and real china plates. And you know what? It was successful, really successful. On weekends, cars would line up around the block. The McDonald brothers were making about $200,000 a year, which in 1940 was serious money. They should have been happy. They should have been satisfied. But they weren't, because Dick and Mac McDonald had a problem that was driving them absolutely insane. Their restaurant was inefficient, chaotic even. Think about it from their perspective. 25 items on the menu meant 25 different things to prepare, 25 ways for orders to get confused, 25 opportunities for delays. The car hops were expensive to employ, and some of them were unreliable. Teenagers, mostly, who showed up late or didn't show up at all. The china plates had to be washed, which meant they needed dishwashers. The silverware had to be cleaned and polished. The whole operation required a huge staff, and coordinating all those people was exhausting. Plus, here's the kicker. Their biggest customers were teenage boys. And teenage boys in 1940s California didn't come to restaurants to eat. They came to hang out, to flirt with the car hops, to show off their cars, to cause trouble. The parking lot was constantly full of kids just loitering, which meant actual paying customers sometimes couldn't find a spot. So one night in 1948, Dick and Mac made a decision that shocked everyone. They closed the restaurant, just shut the doors. They fired all 20 car hops. They sent the dishwashers home. They told their regular customers that they were rethinking everything. And for 3 months, the McDonald brothers basically went into hiding, redesigning their entire business from the ground up. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine having a successful business and just throwing it all away because you think you can do better? That takes guts. Or maybe madness, probably both. Here's what they realized during those 3 months. The problem wasn't the food, the problem was complexity. Too many menu items, too many steps, too many people. So they made a radical decision. They were going to simplify everything. Strip it down to the absolute essentials. They studied their sales records and discovered that 80% of their revenue came from hamburgers, not the barbecue, not the hot dogs, hamburgers. So they made hamburgers the focus. In fact, when they reopened, the entire menu was just 9 items. 9. Hamburgers, cheeseburgers, soft drinks, milk, coffee, potato chips, and pie. That's it. No substitutions. No special orders, no customization, you get what everyone else gets. But the really revolutionary part wasn't the menu, it was the kitchen. Dick McDonald had been thinking about something he'd seen in factories during the war. The assembly line, Henry Ford's great invention. One person does one specific task over and over, becoming incredibly fast and efficient at that task. And Dick thought, why can't we apply that to making hamburgers? So they redesigned the kitchen like a factory floor. They created stations. At the grill station, one person did nothing but cook burger patties. That was his entire job. Flip the burger, watch it cook, take it off when it's done, over and over and over. At the dressing station, another person did nothing but prepare buns. Ketchup, mustard, 2 pickles, onions. The same way every single time. At the fry station, someone made French fries. They eventually brought back fries, you see, because customers missed them. But these weren't just any fries. Mac McDonald became obsessed with finding the perfect potato, the perfect cut, the perfect cooking time. He tested hundreds of varieties before settling on Idaho Russet Burbanks. The man was serious about his fries. And here's the beautiful part. Because each person only did one thing, they got incredibly good at it. The grill guy could cook 30 burgers at once without breaking a sweat. The dressing guy could assemble a burger in 15 seconds. The system was so efficient that they could take an order and deliver a complete meal, burger, fries and drink in 30 seconds. 30 seconds. When they reopened in December of 1948, customers couldn't believe it. Drive-in restaurants typically took 20 to 30 minutes to serve you. McDonald's took 30 seconds. It was like magic. Oh, and the price. Remember how White Castle charged a nickel for a burger? Dick and Mac McDonald charged 15 cents. Still incredibly cheap, but they made up for it in volume. Because they could serve customers so fast, they could serve way more customers. On a busy day, they'd sell hundreds and hundreds of burgers. The profits were actually higher than before, even though they now had a much smaller staff. They'd gone from 20 employees down to just a handful. Fewer people, lower wages, higher profits. It was efficiency taken to an art form. But let me tell you what I find most fascinating about this. The McDonald brothers eliminated something that restaurants had relied on for centuries. Service. There were no waiters, no car hops, no one to take your order at your table. Instead, you walked up to a window, you told them what you wanted, and they handed it to you in a paper bag. You were expected to serve yourself. And amazingly, people loved it. Because it was fast, because it was cheap, because they didn't have to tip anyone. The McDonald brothers had figured out something profound about post-war America. People didn't want to be served anymore. They wanted speed, they wanted efficiency, they wanted to get in and get out. There's something almost cold about that, don't you think? The McDonald brothers took something warm and human, the experience of being served a meal, and turned it mechanical. But that's exactly what America wanted in 1948. The country was in a hurry. The war was over, the economy was booming, and everyone had places to be. Sitting down for a leisurely meal felt old-fashioned. The future was fast. Now the brothers also did something clever with the building itself. They designed it to be eye-catching. They hired an architect named Stanley Meston who created what they called the red and white design. But Dick McDonald felt it was too plain, too flat, so he added something dramatic. 2 golden arches that rose up from either side of the building, reaching 25 feet into the air. They didn't really serve any purpose, they were pure decoration. But man, did they catch your attention. If you were driving down the highway and you saw those golden arches gleaming in the distance, you knew exactly what it was. The building itself became an advertisement. Brilliant. And they didn't stop there. Dick McDonald created a mascot for their new system, a little cartoon chef with a hamburger for a head, and they called him Speedy. Get it? Speedy. Because the whole point was speed. The signs outside the restaurant said Speedy Service System in bold letters. They wanted everyone to know that this wasn't just a restaurant. This was something new, something modern, something revolutionary. They even trademarked the name and started selling franchises to other people who wanted to copy their system. By 1952, they had several McDonald's restaurants operating in California. But here's where the story takes its most important turn. In 1954, a 52-year-old traveling salesman named Ray Kroc drove to San Bernardino to see the McDonald's restaurant for himself. Ray sold multi-mixer machines, which were used to make multiple milkshakes at once, and he'd gotten an order from the McDonald brothers for 8 of these machines. 8. Most restaurants only needed 1 or 2. Ray was curious. What kind of restaurant needs to make that many milkshakes at the same time? So he drove out to see for himself, and what Ray Kroc saw that day changed his life. He arrived around lunchtime and found a line of customers stretching around the building. But the line was moving, fast. People were getting their food and leaving within minutes. Ray stood there watching, mesmerized. He saw the precision, the efficiency, the speed. He saw teenage boys leaving with bags full of burgers. He saw families pulling up in station wagons. He saw working men in coveralls grabbing lunch on their break, and he saw money. Lots and lots of money. The cash register never stopped ringing. Ray Kroc had been a salesman his whole life. Paper cups, mixers, real estate, you name it. He'd hustled for decades without ever really making it big. But standing there in the California sun watching the McDonald brothers' operation run like a well-oiled machine, Ray Kroc had an epiphany. This wasn't just a restaurant, this was a system. And systems could be copied, systems could be franchised, systems could make millions. The McDonald brothers were thinking small, just a few locations in California, but Ray Kroc was thinking big, national, maybe even global. He saw what Dick and Mac couldn't see. He saw the future. Have you ever had a moment like that? A moment where you saw something that everyone else was overlooking, where you realized that something ordinary was actually extraordinary? That's what happened to Ray Kroc in San Bernardino, and he wasn't going to let it slip away. He walked up to the brothers and made them an offer. Let me be your franchise agent. Let me take your system nationwide. Let me make McDonald's a household name. The brothers were skeptical at first. They had tried franchising and hadn't been impressed with the results. Some franchisees changed the menu. Some cut corners on quality. But Ray promised he'd be different. He'd maintain their standards, he'd protect their system, and eventually, reluctantly, Dick and Mac agreed. What Ray Kroc understood, and what the McDonald brothers didn't fully appreciate, was that they hadn't just created a faster way to make hamburgers. They'd created something much more profound. They'd proven that the principles of mass production, the same principles that Henry Ford used to make cars, could be applied to food. They'd shown that you could standardize a meal the same way you standardize a widget, every burger identical, every experience predictable, and in doing so they'd laid the foundation for an industry that would eventually be worth hundreds of billions of dollars. But there's a darker side to this story too, isn't there? Because what the speedy service system really did was reduce cooking to its most mechanical form. The workers weren't chefs. They weren't even cooks, really. They were more like machine operators, each person doing one repetitive task, hour after hour, day after day. There was no creativity, no craftsmanship, no pride in making something from scratch. You weren't making food, you were assembling it. And that assembly line mentality would go on to define not just fast food, but huge parts of the modern service industry. Low wages, high turnover, minimal training, maximum efficiency. The McDonald brothers probably didn't think about those implications in 1948. They were just trying to sell hamburgers faster. But the system they created would shape the working lives of millions of people. Still, in that moment, in 1948, it all seemed like pure progress. The McDonald brothers had taken White Castle's idea of clean, consistent fast food and turbocharged it. They'd made it faster, cheaper, more efficient, more profitable. They'd turned cooking into engineering. And America ate it up, literally, because Americans were ready for this. They'd just won a world war using assembly line production and industrial efficiency. They'd built tanks and planes faster than anyone thought possible. And now they were going to apply that same mindset to lunch. Why spend an hour eating when you can spend 5 minutes? Why pay $1 when you can pay 15 cents? Why make food an experience when you can make it fuel? As we move forward from this chapter, keep that question in your mind. Because the speedy service system didn't just change restaurants, it changed expectations, it changed culture. It made us believe that faster is always better, that efficiency is always the goal, that convenience trumps everything else. And maybe that's true, maybe that's progress, but maybe we lost something too, something we didn't even realize we were giving up. The McDonald brothers certainly didn't think about that. They were just two guys who wanted their kitchen to run smoother, They didn't know they were redesigning American life. But the revolution was only just beginning. Because Ray Kroc was about to take the speedy service system and turn it into something even bigger, even more powerful. He was going to create a franchise empire that would span the globe, that would make the golden arches more recognizable than the Christian cross. He was going to turn McDonald's into the most successful restaurant chain in human history, and the key to all of it wasn't the burgers, it wasn't the fries, it was something else entirely, something that very few people understand even today. We're about to discover what that was. There's something deeply American about eating in your car, something rebellious almost. For thousands of years, meals meant tables and chairs, sitting still, sharing space with other people. But then came the automobile, and with it a strange new question. What if we never had to leave our cars at all? What if the car itself could become the dining room? Tonight, we're exploring one of the oddest innovations in food history, one that would fundamentally change not just how we eat, but how we move through the world. This is the story of the drive-thru, and trust me, it's weirder and more fascinating than you think. Let's go back to Texas, 1921. The same year White Castle opened in Kansas, a man named Jesse Kirby was opening something different in Dallas. He called it the Pig Stand, and it was built right on the highway between Dallas and Fort Worth. Now Jesse was a smart guy, and he'd noticed something interesting. Americans were falling in love with their cars. The Model T had made automobiles affordable, and suddenly everyone wanted to drive. People were taking road trips, Sunday drives, just cruising around for the fun of it. And Jesse thought, what if we built a restaurant specifically for people who don't want to get out of their cars? So the Pig Stand worked like this. You'd pull into the parking lot and a young man, usually dressed in a crisp uniform, would literally run up to your car. They called these guys car hops, and they were fast. Athletic even. They'd take your order right there at your window, run it back to the kitchen, and then run your food back out to you on an aluminum tray that hooked onto your car door. You could sit there, engine off, and eat your barbecue sandwich while listening to the radio. It was revolutionary. No need to walk inside, no need to find a table. You just stayed in your comfortable car and the food came to you. Americans loved it. By 1924, Kirby had 10 pig stands across Dallas, selling 50,000 sandwiches a week. Think about that number, 50,000 sandwiches a week in 1924. The appetite for car dining was massive. But here's the thing about car hop service. It was expensive. You needed a lot of employees. You needed them to be fast and reliable, which meant paying them decent wages. And there was another problem. Weather. Rain, snow, scorching heat. Car hops had to work in all of it. Restaurant owners started thinking, there's got to be a better way, a more efficient way. And that's when someone had a brilliant, simple idea. What if instead of bringing the food to the car, we made the car come to the food? What if we just cut a window in the building and handed the food directly to the driver? No car hops needed. No running back and forth. Just a window, a speaker, and a bag of food. The first person to really figure this out was a man named Sheldon Chaney, though everyone called him Red because of his bright red hair. In 1947, Red opened a tiny hamburger stand in Springfield, Missouri, right on Route 66, that famous highway that stretched from Chicago to Los Angeles. Red's place was called Red's Giant Hamburg, and yes, he spelled it Hamburg, not Hamburger. Why? Because the sign he ordered was too tall and would have interfered with the power lines overhead. So he just shortened the word. Problem solved. Very practical, very American. But the real innovation at Red's wasn't the name, it was the window. Red cut a service window into the side of his small white building. You'd pull up in your car, roll down your window, shout your order, and moments later, Red would hand you a paper bag with your hamburger and fries. No parking required, no waiting. You could literally keep your engine running the whole time. This was the first true drive-thru in America, not a drive-in where you parked, a drive-thru where you kept moving. And Route 66 travelers absolutely loved it. They were already on the road. They didn't want to stop. They wanted to grab food and keep driving toward California, toward the sunset, toward whatever dreams they were chasing. Red's Giant Hamburg let them do exactly that. Now, Red's place was small and it stayed small. But out in California, a young couple named Harry and Esther Snyder were watching this trend very carefully. Harry was a mechanic, good with his hands, always tinkering with things. Esther was sharp with numbers, managed the books, kept everything organized. And in 1948, the same year the McDonald brothers were revolutionizing their kitchen, Harry and Esther opened their own drive-thru burger stand in Baldwin Park, California. They called it In-N-Out Burger. The name said it all. Get in, get your burger, get out, fast, simple, efficient. But Harry Snyder took the concept one step further. See, at Red's place you had to shout your order through the window, and sometimes the kitchen staff couldn't hear you over the noise of cars and cooking. Harry thought, there's got to be a better way. So he invented something that seems obvious now, but was revolutionary in 1948. A two-way speaker system. You'd pull up to a small box with a speaker and a microphone, place your order, and your voice would be transmitted directly into the kitchen. The kitchen staff could respond, confirm your order, and have it ready by the time you pulled up to the window. Harry spent months perfecting this system, staying up late at night after the restaurant closed, testing different wires and speakers and amplifiers. His kids would later remember him hunched over the workbench in their garage, completely obsessed with getting the sound quality just right. And when it finally worked, it was magical. You didn't even have to get out of your car. You barely had to stop. You just pulled up, spoke into a box, drove forward 30 feet and picked up your food. The whole transaction took maybe 90 seconds. Harry and Esther put a big sign outside that said no delay, and they meant it. No delay, no waiting, no hassle, just burgers delivered to your car window at the speed of modern life. Can you imagine how futuristic that must have felt in 1948? It was like something from a science fiction movie, speaking into a box and having food appear. Magic. Other restaurants quickly copied the idea. Jack in the Box opened in San Diego in 1951 as a drive-thru only restaurant with a giant clown head on top that spoke your order back to you. Sonic Drive-In, which opened in Oklahoma in 1953, combined the old car hop style with the new speaker technology. You'd pull into a parking spot, press a button, order through a speaker, and a car hop would bring your food out on roller skates. It was the best of both worlds. The theatre and personality of car hop service with the efficiency of modern technology. But the real explosion of drive-thrus didn't happen until the 1970s. And the reason is fascinating. It wasn't because of technology. It wasn't because of cars. It was because of women. Let me explain. In the 1950s and 60s, most American families had one income. Dad worked. Mum stayed home. Mum had time to cook dinner. But starting in the 1970s, that changed dramatically. More and more women entered the workforce. By 1975, nearly half of American mothers were working outside the home, and that created a problem. Who was going to cook dinner? Families were busy, everyone was working, everyone was tired. Coming home at 6 o'clock and spending an hour preparing a meal felt impossible. People needed fast solutions, and the drive-thru was the perfect answer. McDonald's, which had resisted drive-thrus for decades, finally opened their first one in 1975 in Sierra Vista, Arizona. It was located near a military base where soldiers weren't allowed to leave their cars in uniform. The drive-thru let them grab food without violating regulations. McDonald's executives were skeptical at first. They worried it would slow down service, create traffic problems, hurt the dining room business. But the opposite happened. The drive-thru became wildly popular. Within a few years, nearly every McDonald's in America had one, and sales went through the roof. By the 1980s, drive-thru sales were accounting for more than half of all fast food revenue. Half? Think about what that means. Americans were literally eating most of their fast food while sitting in their cars. Now here's where things get really interesting. The drive-thru didn't just change restaurants, it changed cars. Before drive-thrus became common, most cars didn't have cup holders. It seems crazy now, right? Every car today has multiple cup holders. Some can hold 6 or 7 drinks. But in the 1970s, cup holders were rare. You'd balance your drink between your legs or hold it in one hand while driving with the other. Dangerous and uncomfortable. But as drive-thrus exploded in popularity, car manufacturers noticed a problem. People were buying drinks at the drive-thru and had nowhere to put them. So in the 1980s, automakers started adding cup holders as a standard feature. First 1, then 2, then 4. Today, some minivans have 14 cup holders. 14. The drive-thru literally redesigned the interior of American automobiles, and it changed food too. Think about it. If people are going to eat in their cars, the food needs to be car-friendly. You can't have soup dripping on your lap. You can't have spaghetti requiring a fork and knife. Everything needs to be handheld, wrapped, contained. This is why burgers became king. This is why French fries are served in containers that fit in cup holders. This is why tacos were redesigned to be less messy. Taco Bell even invented something called the gordita specifically because it was easier to eat with one hand while driving. The drive-thru didn't just deliver food to your car, it redesigned the food itself to fit car culture. But there's something kind of sad about all this, don't you think? Because what we're really talking about is the end of eating as a social activity. For most of human history, meals were communal. You sat down with your family or your friends or even strangers. You talked, you connected. Sharing food was how humans bonded. But the drive-thru said, forget all that. Eat alone. Eat in your car. Eat while you're doing something else, like driving. Food became fuel, something you consumed quickly while moving from one place to another. And we lost something in that trade-off. We gained convenience. We lost connection. There's also an interesting class dimension to this. Drive-thrus became most popular in suburban and rural areas where cars were essential. But in dense cities where people walked or took public transit, drive-thrus were less common. So the drive-thru became a symbol of a certain kind of American life, the suburban life, the car-dependent life, the life where you drive everywhere, where walking is unusual, where your car is basically your second home. And fast food companies noticed this. They started building drive-thrus in specific locations, targeting specific communities. Poorer neighborhoods often got more drive-thrus than wealthier ones. Convenient, yes, but also strategic. Fast food companies knew that people without a lot of time or money would rely on drive-thrus. They built their empires on that knowledge. Now you might be wondering, is the drive-thru still relevant today? In an era of DoorDash and Uber Eats, when food comes to your house, who needs a drive-thru? But here's the fascinating part. Drive-thrus are more popular than ever. During the COVID-19 pandemic, when dining rooms closed, drive-thrus became a lifeline for restaurants. Some chains reported that drive-thrus accounted for 90% of their sales. 90%. And even now, with restrictions lifted, people still prefer the drive-thru. Why? Because it's fast. Because you don't have to interact with anyone. Because you can stay in your private bubble, your car, and never expose yourself to the public. The drive-thru isn't just convenient anymore. It's comfortable. It's safe. It's how Americans prefer to eat. But some places are pushing back. Minneapolis banned the construction of new drive-thrus in 2019, citing environmental concerns. Cars idling in drive-thru lines produce emissions. They contribute to climate change. They create traffic. Other cities have followed suit. Fairhaven, New Jersey, Long Beach, California, Orchard Park, New York. They're all saying maybe the drive-thru isn't progress. Maybe it's the problem. Because those cars waiting in line, engines running, air conditioning blasting, they're burning fuel just to get a hamburger. The convenience comes at a cost. And yet, Americans love their drive-thrus. We love them so much that we've extended the concept to everything. Drive-thru banks, drive-thru pharmacies, drive-thru weddings in Las Vegas. There's even a drive-thru funeral home in Louisiana where you can view the deceased through a window without leaving your car. I'm not making that up. We've taken Harry Snyder's simple invention, that two-way speaker system, and turned it into a way of life, a way of avoiding human contact, a way of staying in motion even when we're supposed to be stopping to eat. So where does this leave us? The drive-thru was supposed to be about convenience, about saving time, but somewhere along the way, it became about something else: isolation, efficiency at the expense of experience, speed at the cost of savor. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that's what modern life requires. Maybe we're all just too busy to slow down. But I can't help wondering what Harry Snyder would think if he could see what his invention became. Would he be proud, or would he be a little bit sad? Because his two-way speaker system didn't just change how we order food. It changed how we relate to food, to each other, to the world outside our cars. The drive-thru transformed eating into something you do alone, in motion, between other activities. And that transformation is now so complete that most of us can't imagine life any other way. But it wasn't always like this, and it doesn't have to be like this. The question is, do we want it to be? That's something worth thinking about as we continue this journey. Because the story of fast food isn't just about hamburgers and French fries. It's about the choices we make collectively, about what kind of life we want to live. And the drive-thru represents a very specific choice, the choice of convenience over everything else, the choice of speed over stillness, the choice of the car over the table. But hold on, because we're not done yet. We've talked about how fast food got faster, how it got more efficient, how it learned to meet us where we are, in our cars, in our hurry. But we haven't talked about why it became so impossible to resist, why it's so addictive, why you can know intellectually that you shouldn't eat it and yet find yourself pulling into that drive-thru anyway. That's not an accident. That's science. Deliberate, calculated science. And we're about to pull back the curtain on exactly how fast food companies engineer their products to hijack your brain. Here's a question I want you to think about honestly. Have you ever craved a Big Mac at 2 a.m? Have you ever felt an almost physical pull toward those golden arches, even though you knew you shouldn't go? Have you ever told yourself just this once and then found yourself back in that same drive-thru 3 days later? If you answered yes to any of these questions, you're not weak. You're not lacking willpower. You're experiencing something that food scientists have spent billions of dollars perfecting. You're experiencing addiction. And tonight, we're going to understand exactly how it works. Let me start with something that sounds impossible but is scientifically verified. Your brain responds to a McDonald's hamburger almost identically to how it responds to cocaine. I know that sounds dramatic. I know it sounds like exaggeration. But researchers at the Scripps Research Institute in Florida actually studied this. They took rats and gave them unlimited access to bacon, sausage, cheesecake, and other high-fat, high-sugar foods. Essentially, they gave the rats fast food. And you know what happened? The rats became addicted. They kept eating even when they were full. They kept eating even when they were given electric shocks as punishment. The pleasure centers in their brains lit up exactly like the brains of rats addicted to heroin. The rats had lost control, and when the researchers tried to take the junk food away, the rats showed withdrawal symptoms, anxiety, shaking, refusal to eat normal food. Sound familiar? Now you might be thinking, okay, but rats aren't humans. Fair point. So let's talk about what happens in your brain when you eat fast food. In the center of your brain, there's a structure called the nucleus accumbens. Scientists call it the reward center, but I like to think of it as the pleasure button. When you experience something your brain considers good, eating, sex, listening to music, winning a game, this area floods with a chemical called dopamine. Dopamine makes you feel amazing, happy, satisfied, alive. It's one of the most powerful chemicals in your body. And here's the critical part. Fast food triggers a dopamine release that's way bigger than normal food. Way bigger. A home-cooked chicken breast might give you a little dopamine bump. A Big Mac with large fries and a Coke, that's a dopamine tsunami. Why? Because of something called the bliss point. This is a term invented by a food scientist named Howard Moskowitz, and it's one of the most important concepts in understanding modern food. The bliss point is the precise combination of salt, sugar, and fat that produces maximum pleasure in your brain. Not too much salt, or it tastes bad, not too little, or it's boring, but exactly the right amount to make your brain scream, more, more, more. Fast food companies employ entire teams of chemists and food scientists whose only job is to find this bliss point for every product. They test thousands of variations, different ratios of ingredients, different cooking methods, different temperatures. They put people in labs, give them samples, measure their brain responses, track their eye movements, monitor their heart rates, all to find that perfect formula that makes you crave their food, and they've gotten really, really good at it. Take French fries, for example. You'd think a French fry is simple, right? It's just a potato sliced and fried. But a McDonald's French fry is actually one of the most engineered foods on the planet. It contains 19 ingredients, 19. Potatoes, obviously, but also salt, dextrose, which is a type of sugar, sodium acid, pyrophosphate to maintain colour, and something called natural beef flavour, which is actually a chemical compound designed to activate the umami receptors in your tongue. The fries are par-fried in a blend of oils, frozen, shipped, and then fried again at the restaurant. Every step is calculated. The length of the fry exactly 3 inches to 3.5 inches. The thickness exactly 1/4 inch. The salt content exactly enough to make you thirsty so you buy a drink. Nothing is accidental, nothing is left to chance. But here's where it gets really interesting. Fast food doesn't just satisfy hunger, it creates a psychological loop that's incredibly hard to break. Researchers at Yale University studied this phenomenon and found that people who regularly eat fast food develop something called conditioned hypereating. Your brain learns to associate specific cues with the pleasure of eating. The smell of French fries, the sight of golden arches, the sound of a soda fizzing, even the crinkle of a paper bag. These cues trigger anticipatory dopamine release. Your brain starts producing pleasure chemicals before you even taste the food, just from the expectation, and that makes the craving incredibly powerful. There's also the speed factor we talked about earlier, but now we understand it in a new way. Remember how fast food can get you a meal in 90 seconds? That speed is actually part of the addiction. When you want something and you can have it immediately, you get what psychologists call instant gratification. The gap between desire and satisfaction is almost zero, and that trains your brain to expect instant reward. Think about it like drugs. Pills take 20 minutes to hit your system. You have to wait. But heroin injected into your bloodstream hits your brain in seconds. The shorter the gap between wanting and having, the more addictive the substance becomes. Fast food is the heroin of eating. You want it, you drive through, you have it. Boom. Instant satisfaction, instant dopamine. And your brain remembers that. Your brain craves that speed. Now let's talk about sugar, because this is where things get truly scary. Nearly everything on a fast food menu contains sugar. The buns are sweetened. The ketchup is loaded with high fructose corn syrup. The soft drinks are basically liquid sugar. Even the pickles have sugar added. A medium McDonald's Coke contains 77 grams of sugar. That's more than 18 teaspoons. Imagine sitting down and eating 18 spoonfuls of sugar. You'd probably get sick. But dissolved in carbonated water with flavoring, you barely notice it, and sugar is powerfully addictive. Studies at Princeton University showed that rats given intermittent access to sugar solution developed all the hallmarks of addiction: binging when they had access, craving when they didn't, withdrawal symptoms when it was taken away. The researcher, Bart Hobel, said the findings were consistent with the hypothesis that under certain circumstances rats can become dependent on sugar. But wait, there's more, because fast food doesn't just contain sugar. It often comes with caffeine. That Coke you're drinking? Caffeine. That coffee you grabbed at the drive-thru? Obviously caffeine. And caffeine is what scientists call a model drug of dependence. It's one of the most widely consumed psychoactive substances in the world. It's addictive. It produces tolerance, meaning you need more and more to get the same effect, and it causes withdrawal headaches, fatigue, irritability when you stop consuming it. So fast food companies have figured out how to combine sugar, salt, fat, and caffeine into a single meal. It's a chemical cocktail designed to hook you. And if you're someone who struggles with weight, the situation is even worse. Research shows that obese individuals often have fewer dopamine receptors in their brains, specifically something called D2 receptors. Let me explain what that means. If you have fewer receptors, you need more stimulation to get the same pleasure. It's like someone turning down the volume on your happiness. So you eat more, trying to reach that feeling of satisfaction, but it keeps slipping away. You need bigger portions, more frequent meals, stronger flavors. It's a vicious cycle. And fast food companies know this. They know that their most profitable customers are the ones who keep coming back again and again, trying to recapture that dopamine high. There's also something deeply psychological happening with convenience. Fast food restaurants are everywhere. In the United States, you're almost never more than 5 minutes from a McDonald's or Burger King or Wendy's. That ubiquity is part of the addiction model. Researchers studying substance abuse have found that addiction rates spike when drugs become more available and affordable. When crack cocaine became cheap and widespread in the 1980s, addiction exploded. Same principle with fast food. When it's on every corner, when you pass it multiple times a day, when it's always an option, it becomes incredibly hard to resist. Your brain is constantly being reminded that pleasure is available. Just pull over, just stop in, just this once. And here's something I find really troubling. Fast food companies have specifically targeted low-income neighborhoods. Studies have shown that poorer areas have significantly higher concentrations of fast food restaurants than wealthy areas. Why? Because people with less money and less time are more vulnerable to the convenience argument. If you're working 2 jobs, exhausted, barely making ends meet, the idea of cooking a healthy meal from scratch feels impossible. The drive-thru is right there. It's cheap, it's fast, it's comforting. And if you're stressed, which people in poverty often are, you're even more susceptible to craving high-fat, high-sugar foods. Stress increases cortisol, which increases appetite, particularly for calorie-dense foods. It's biological. Fast food companies have built their empires by understanding and exploiting these patterns. But let me tell you about one of the sneakiest tricks in the fast food playbook. It's called the completion point, and it's genius in a really dark way. Food scientists discovered that if you make food too satisfying, people will eat it and feel full and stop. That's bad for business. But if you make food just satisfying enough to taste good, but not satisfying enough to make you feel truly full, people will keep eating. And eating and eating. Think about how fast food burgers are designed. They're soft, they almost melt in your mouth. You barely have to chew. The bun is fluffy, the patty is thin. You can eat one in maybe a minute and you don't feel full. You feel like you could eat another. So you order a second burger, or large fries, or a dessert. The food is engineered to be incomplete, to leave you wanting more. It's designed for overconsumption. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. If it's so addictive, why don't we treat it like cigarettes or alcohol? Why aren't there warning labels on Big Macs? Well, some people are trying. There have been lawsuits. In 2002, a group of teenagers sued McDonald's claiming the food made them obese. The case was dismissed, but it started a conversation. Since then, fast food chains have been required to post calorie information. Some cities have banned toys in Happy Meals unless the meal meets certain nutritional standards. There is a growing movement to treat fast food as a public health crisis, not just a personal choice issue, but the industry fights back hard. They argue that people have free will, that nobody forces you to eat fast food, that obesity is about personal responsibility, not corporate manipulation. And on the surface, that sounds reasonable. But here's the thing. When a team of scientists spends millions of dollars engineering a product to be as addictive as possible, using your brain chemistry against you, exploiting your stress and your exhaustion and your financial situation, is that really free choice? Or is it something else? Is it predatory? I'm not going to tell you what to think, but I do think it's worth asking the question. Let me give you a personal example to make this real. I talked to a woman named Sarah for this story. She's 32, works as a nurse, has 2 kids. She knows fast food is unhealthy. She's a medical professional. She understands nutrition. But she told me she eats fast food 4 or 5 times a week. Why? Because after a 12-hour shift at the hospital, exhausted, still in scrubs, she drives past a Taco Bell on her way home. And in that moment, the idea of going to the grocery store, shopping for ingredients, coming home, cooking, cleaning up, it feels overwhelming, impossible. But the Taco Bell is right there. Bright lights, easy parking, 5 minutes, and she has dinner for her whole family. And it's not just convenience, she said. It's comfort. After a hard day, that familiar taste, those flavors she's known since childhood, they make her feel better, less stressed. They give her a moment of pleasure in an otherwise difficult day. That's the trap. Fast food isn't just food. It's emotional regulation. It's stress relief. It's a chemical hug when you need one. And the companies know this. They market it this way. Have you noticed how fast food ads almost never focus on the food itself anymore? They focus on feelings, family togetherness, friendship, happiness. I'm loving it, remember? Not I'm eating it. Loving it. They're selling love. They're selling comfort. They're selling the idea that their food will make your life better, easier, happier. And when you're stressed and tired and overwhelmed, that message is incredibly powerful. There's one more piece to this puzzle, and it's about memory. Our brains are wired to remember where we found high-calorie food because evolutionarily, that kept us alive. If you found a tree full of ripe fruit, your brain made sure you remembered exactly where that tree was so you could go back. Fast food hijacks this ancient system. Your brain remembers that the McDonald's on 5th Street gave you that dopamine rush. It files that information away as important. And then, when you're driving and you see those golden arches, your brain says, hey, remember this place? Remember how good it made us feel? And suddenly you're hungry even if you weren't 2 minutes ago. The craving appears out of nowhere. That's not weakness. That's millions of years of evolution being exploited by modern food science. So where does this leave us? Are we all just helpless victims of neuroscience? Are we doomed to be controlled by abyss points and dopamine loops? I don't think so. But I do think awareness is the first step. Understanding that fast food is literally designed to be addictive, that your cravings aren't random, that your brain is being manipulated, that knowledge gives you power. It doesn't make the cravings go away, but it helps you see them for what they are. Not truth, not need, just chemicals and conditioning. The fast food industry has spent a century figuring out how to make their products irresistible. They've turned eating into a science experiment, and we're the test subjects. They've discovered the exact combination of ingredients that lights up our brains like a Christmas tree. And they've made these products cheap, fast, and available everywhere. It's an almost perfect system for creating dependence. But it's not unbeatable. People do break free. People do change their eating habits. It's hard. It requires understanding what you're up against. But it's possible. And here's the thing. This isn't where the story ends. Because the addiction, the brain chemistry, the engineered cravings, those are just tools. Tools used to build something much bigger. An empire. A global system. Fast food didn't stay a small business in California or Kansas. It became a worldwide phenomenon, one of the most successful business models in human history. And the man who figured out how to make that happen, how to take this addictive product and spread it across the entire planet, was a middle-aged milkshake machine salesman with a dream. His name was Ray Kroc, and we're about to discover how he turned a single hamburger stand into an empire that would reshape global culture. Sometimes the person who changes everything isn't the inventor, it's the salesman, the person who sees potential where others see just a product. The person who understands that what you're really selling isn't hamburgers or milkshakes or French fries. What you're really selling is a system, a replicable, scalable, profitable system. And nobody understood this better than Ray Kroc. Tonight, we're diving into one of the most fascinating business stories of the 20th century. How a 52-year-old man who'd failed at almost everything he'd tried took someone else's idea and turned it into the most recognizable brand on planet Earth. This isn't just a story about business success. It's a story about obsession, vision, and the thin line between inspiration and theft. Ray Kroc was not a young man when he discovered McDonald's. He was 52 years old in 1954, and by most measures, his life had been a series of disappointments. He'd been a piano player during the Jazz Age, then a paper cup salesman, then a real estate agent in Florida during the boom, which went bust. Then back to sales, this time selling multi-mixer machines, devices that could make 5 milkshakes at once. And he was good at it, good enough to make a living, but he was never going to get rich selling milkshake machines. He knew that. He was driving around the Midwest, staying in cheap hotels, eating bad diner food, watching younger men pass him by. At 52, Ray Kroc was running out of time to make his mark on the world. And then he got that order from San Bernardino, 8 multi-mixers for one restaurant. That was unusual. Extremely unusual. Most restaurants bought 1, maybe 2. 8 meant they were making an incredible volume of milkshakes. Ray was curious, but more than that, he was desperate. Desperate for something bigger, something meaningful. So he drove to California to see this McDonald's place for himself. And what he saw that day changed his life. But here's what's interesting. Ray didn't see hamburgers. He didn't see French fries or milkshakes. He saw something much more valuable. He saw a system that could be copied, endlessly, perfectly, profitably. Let me paint the picture for you. Ray stood in that parking lot in San Bernardino, watching the McDonald brothers' operation during lunch rush. Lines of customers, but the lines moved fast. Orders placed, food delivered, customers leaving satisfied, all within minutes. And Ray noticed something the McDonald brothers probably took for granted. Every single hamburger was identical. Every order of fries was the same. Every experience was predictable. And that predictability was the secret. Because Americans in 1954 were moving around more than ever. The interstate highway system was being built. Families were taking road trips. Businessmen were traveling for work. And when you're in a strange town, exhausted, hungry, you don't want adventure. You want familiarity. You want to know exactly what you're getting. McDonald's offered that certainty. But the McDonald brothers were thinking small. They had a handful of franchises, sure, but they weren't interested in massive expansion. They liked their life in San Bernardino. They were making good money. Why complicate things? Ray Kroc saw their lack of ambition and recognized it as an opportunity. He approached Dick and Mac with a proposition. Let me be your franchise agent. Let me take your system nationwide. I'll handle everything. You just keep perfecting the product. The brothers were skeptical. They'd tried franchising before and weren't impressed with the results. Some franchisees cut corners, some changed the menu, some didn't maintain cleanliness standards. But Ray promised he'd be different. He'd maintain quality. He'd protect their system. He'd make them rich. Eventually, the brothers agreed to let Ray try. They signed a contract giving him franchising rights. Ray's cut would be just 1.9% of sales, a tiny fraction. But Ray didn't care about the percentage. He cared about scale. 1% of $1 billion is more than 50% of $1 million. Ray was thinking bigger than the McDonald brothers ever had. Ray Kroc opened his first McDonald's franchise in Des Plaines, Illinois, in April of 1955, a suburb of Chicago, working-class families, lots of cars, perfect location. And from day one, Ray was obsessed with replication. He didn't just want to copy the McDonald brothers' system, he wanted to perfect it, document it, turn it into something that any franchisee could follow exactly. So he did something remarkable. He created what would eventually become a 750-page operations manual. 750 pages about making hamburgers. Think about that. This manual specified everything. How to cook the burger, exactly 1 minute and 45 seconds per side. How many pickles to use, 2. How much ketchup, 1 ounce. What temperature to keep the fries, exactly 325 degrees Fahrenheit. How to greet customers, how to take orders, how to clean the bathrooms, how to mop the floors, even how to fold the hamburger wrapper. Nothing was left to chance. Nothing was open to interpretation. And here's the genius of it. By documenting every single step, Ray made it possible for someone with no restaurant experience to run a successful McDonald's. You didn't need to be a chef. You didn't need to understand food. You just needed to follow the manual. This was revolutionary. Most restaurants at the time relied on skilled cooks who learned through apprenticeship and experience. But Ray was saying, forget skill, forget experience, just follow the instructions. It was the industrialization of cooking. It was Fordism applied to food, and it worked spectacularly. Ray opened franchise after franchise, Illinois, California, Indiana, Ohio. By 1959, there were 100 McDonald's restaurants across America. By 1963, 500. The growth was exponential, but Ray did something else that was equally important. He created a school. I'm not joking. In 1961, Ray opened what he called Hamburger University in the basement of a McDonald's restaurant in Elk Grove Village, Illinois. Hamburger University. It sounds ridiculous, right? But Ray was completely serious. This was where franchisees and managers would learn the McDonald's system. They'd study the manual, practice cooking techniques, learn about customer service, accounting, marketing. They'd take tests, get grades, graduate with a degree in hamburgerology. Again, I'm not making this up, that was the actual term. a degree in hamburgerology, and the thing is, it worked. Hamburger University created a shared culture. Every graduate spoke the same language, understood the same principles, believed in the same standards. It was brilliant. Ray was creating an army of true believers who would spread the McDonald's gospel across the country. Now, here's where the story gets complicated. Because Ray Kroc and the McDonald brothers started to clash. The brothers thought Ray was pushing too hard, growing too fast, spending too much money. Ray thought the brothers were small-minded, holding him back. The tension grew and grew, and in 1961 Ray made a bold move. He offered to buy the brothers out completely, take their name, their system, everything. The brothers agreed, but they wanted a high price, $2.7 million. In 1961, that was an enormous sum. Ray didn't have that kind of money, so he borrowed it. He mortgaged everything, his house, his life savings. He went deeply into debt, but he got what he wanted. Full control of McDonald's. The brothers walked away with their money and went back to their quiet lives in California. Ray Kroc became the sole owner of what would become the most successful restaurant chain in history. But there's something ethically murky about this, isn't there? Dick and Mac McDonald invented the speedy service system. They created the menu. They designed the kitchen. They figured out the assembly line approach. Ray Kroc didn't invent any of it. He was a salesman who recognized the value of what the brothers had created and then took it from them. Now, you could argue he paid them fairly. $2.7 million was a lot of money. But by the time Ray died in 1984, McDonald's was worth hundreds of millions, and eventually billions. The McDonald brothers got a one-time payment. Ray got an empire. Was that fair? I don't know. Business is complicated, but it's worth thinking about who we celebrate. We remember Ray Kroc as the founder of McDonald's. Most people don't even know who Dick and Mac McDonald were. History belongs to the scalers, not the inventors. What Ray understood, better than almost anyone at the time, was that he wasn't really in the hamburger business. He was in the real estate business. This was his most brilliant insight. Here's how it worked. When a franchisee wanted to open a McDonald's, they didn't just pay Ray a franchise fee. Ray, through a company he created called the McDonald's Real Estate Corporation, would find the location, buy or lease the land, build the restaurant, and then lease everything back to the franchisee at a markup. So Ray was making money on the franchise fee, on the percentage of sales, and on the real estate. It was a triple income stream, and the real estate piece was the most lucrative. This strategy made McDonald's incredibly wealthy. By the 1970s, McDonald's owned more real estate than almost any other company in America. They were one of the largest property owners in the country. The hamburgers were almost beside the point. The real money was in the land. Ray also had a philosophy about franchisees that was different from most companies. He believed that franchisees should make money before the corporation did. That might sound counterintuitive, but it was smart. If your franchisees are successful, they stay loyal. They follow your rules. They protect your brand. They become your biggest advocates. So Ray didn't squeeze his franchisees. He supported them. He provided training. He helped them succeed, and in return they built his empire. By 1992, McDonald's franchisees were generating 39% of the company's revenue. But more importantly, they were ambassadors, walking, talking advertisements for the McDonald's system. Some of them became multimillionaires themselves, and they told everyone who would listen that the McDonald's model worked. There's an interesting human element to all of this too. Ray Kroc was not, by most accounts, a nice man. He was demanding, impatient, ruthless even. He divorced his first wife after McDonald's became successful and married another woman. He demanded absolute loyalty from his employees and franchisees. If you questioned him, you were out. If you didn't follow the manual exactly, you were out. He ran McDonald's like a military operation. But that rigidity, that uncompromising vision, is probably why it succeeded. Ray didn't accept good enough. He demanded perfection, every time, everywhere, and that obsessive attention to detail created the consistency that customers came to expect. He also understood marketing in a way the McDonald brothers never did. In 1963, Ray introduced Ronald McDonald, a clown mascot designed to appeal to children. This was genius. Get the kids hooked and the parents will follow. Ronald McDonald became one of the most recognizable characters in the world, more famous than Mickey Mouse in some countries. Ray also pioneered television advertising for fast food. Those early McDonald's commercials are fascinating to watch now. They're wholesome, family-friendly. They show smiling kids eating hamburgers, happy parents, clean restaurants. The message was clear. McDonald's is safe. McDonald's is American. McDonald's is where good families go. It was propaganda, really. Brilliantly effective propaganda. And then there's the Happy Meal, introduced in 1979. A burger, fries, a drink, a toy, all in a colourful box designed to delight children. The Happy Meal wasn't just food. It was an experience, a collectible. Kids would beg their parents to go to McDonald's not because they were hungry, but because they wanted the toy. And McDonald's would partner with movie studios, Disney especially, to include toys from popular films. Star Wars toys, Lion King toys, Pokemon toys. This created a feedback loop. Movies advertised McDonald's. McDonald's advertised movies. Kids wanted both. Parents paid for both. It was marketing symbiosis, and it worked. The Happy Meal became one of the most successful product launches in history. But let's zoom out for a moment and think about what Ray Kroc really created. He didn't just build a restaurant chain. He built a model for replication, for turning human skill into mechanical process, for scaling personal service into impersonal efficiency. The McDonald's model has been copied by almost every industry you can think of. Hotels, coffee shops, retail stores, even hospitals and schools have adopted McDonald's-style standardization. There's a term for this, coined by sociologist George Ritzer. He called it McDonaldization, the process by which the principles of the fast food restaurant efficiency, calculability, predictability, and control come to dominate more and more sectors of society. Think about that. Ray Kroc didn't just change how we eat. He changed how we think about organization, about work, about life itself. And the franchising model Ray perfected, it became the backbone of American business expansion. Subway, Domino's, Pizza Hut, Holiday Inn, H&R Block, all of them use variations of the McDonald's franchise model. Ray proved that you could build a massive corporation without owning or operating most of the locations. You just needed a good system and people willing to invest in it. It was democratized capitalism in a way. Anyone with some capital and a willingness to work hard could own a McDonald's and potentially become wealthy. The American dream, franchised and sold by the slice. By the time Ray Kroc died in 1984, there were over 7,500 McDonald's restaurants in 32 countries. The Golden Arches were becoming a global symbol. But Ray's vision went even further. He believed McDonald's could be in every country on Earth, every city, every town, everywhere, and his successors shared that vision. They kept expanding, kept building, kept perfecting the system. Today there are over 38,000 McDonald's restaurants in more than 100 countries. They serve 69 million customers every single day. 69 million. That's roughly the entire population of the United Kingdom eating at McDonald's every 24 hours. It's staggering. It's unprecedented. It's exactly what Ray Kroc dreamed of. But success on that scale comes with consequences, cultural consequences, economic consequences, health consequences. Because once you've built a system this efficient, this profitable, this dominant, you can't just serve food anymore. You become something else. You become a cultural force, an economic power, a political player. McDonald's isn't just a restaurant. It's a symbol of America, of capitalism, of globalization. And depending on who you ask, that symbol means very different things. To some, it means opportunity and innovation. To others, it means exploitation and cultural imperialism. Both can be true at the same time. Ray Kroc proved that you could take a simple idea, systematize it, document it, franchise it, and build an empire. He showed that consistency beats creativity when it comes to scale. That predictability is more profitable than personality. That following a manual can make you richer than following your instincts. Whether that's good or bad is up to you to decide. But one thing is certain, Ray Kroc changed the world. He took the McDonald brothers' little hamburger stand and turned it into a global phenomenon. And in doing so, he created a template that thousands of other companies would follow. The franchise model, the operations manual, the focus on systems over people. These ideas now dominate modern business, and they all trace back to a 52-year-old milkshake machine salesman who refused to accept that his best years were behind him. But building the empire was only half the story, because once McDonald's became a household name, once those golden arches were on every highway and in every suburb, the company faced a new challenge. How do you make people choose your restaurant over all the others? How do you turn occasional customers into loyal fanatics? How do you make sure that when someone thinks fast food, they think of you first? The answer wasn't better food or lower prices. The answer was something far more powerful. Something that would reshape not just fast food, but all of advertising. We're about to enter the world of marketing psychology, where hamburgers sell happiness and French fries sell belonging. This is where fast food stopped being about food at all. Close your eyes for a moment and think about the first fast food restaurant you remember visiting as a child. Can you picture it? The colours, probably bright red and yellow. The smell, maybe French fries and something sweet. The sounds, other kids laughing, maybe a birthday party happening in the corner. And most likely there was a toy involved. A little plastic something that you absolutely had to have. Now open your eyes and ask yourself, was that a memory? Or was it an implanted desire, carefully crafted by people who studied child psychology to figure out exactly how to make you want their product for the rest of your life? Tonight, we're going to explore something that makes most people uncomfortable. How fast food companies don't just sell food. They sell identity, belonging, happiness, and nostalgia. And they start selling it to you before you're old enough to understand what's happening. Let's start with a clown. His name is Ronald McDonald, and he might be the most successful marketing character in human history. More children worldwide recognize Ronald McDonald than recognize Santa Claus. Let that sink in for a moment. A corporate mascot designed to sell hamburgers is more famous than a mythological figure that's existed for centuries. Ronald was introduced in 1963, and from the beginning he wasn't selling food, he was selling friendship. In early television commercials, Ronald didn't talk about how good the burgers tasted. He played with children, he did magic tricks, he made kids laugh. The message was subtle but powerful. McDonald's isn't just a restaurant. It's where fun happens. It's where you belong. And Ronald is your friend. He wants you to be happy. And happiness, conveniently, is available for just a few dollars at the counter. But Ronald was just the beginning. Fast food companies quickly realized that if you could capture children's loyalty early, you'd have customers for life. So they studied what kids wanted. And what kids wanted, it turned out, was toys. In 1979, McDonald's introduced the Happy Meal, a complete meal designed specifically for children, packaged in a colourful box with puzzles and games printed on it, and most importantly, containing a toy. That toy was the key. Children didn't ask their parents to go to McDonald's because they were hungry, they asked because they wanted the toy. And parents, exhausted from work, wanting to make their kids happy, wanting a quick, easy dinner solution, would give in. Everyone wins, right? The kid gets a toy, the parent gets convenience. McDonald's gets lifelong customers. The genius of the Happy Meal was that McDonald's figured out how to partner with whatever was popular in children's culture at that moment. When Star Wars was big, Happy Meals had Star Wars toys. When Disney released a new movie, Happy Meals had Disney toys. When Pokémon was everywhere, Happy Meals had Pokémon toys. This created a self-reinforcing loop. Kids watched a movie, wanted toys from that movie, saw commercials saying those toys were at McDonald's, begged parents to go to McDonald's, got the toy, ate the food, and in the process, developed positive associations between McDonald's and happiness, between the golden arches and fun. This wasn't accidental. This was psychological engineering, and it worked spectacularly. By the 2000s, McDonald's was selling roughly 1.5 billion Happy Meals per year globally. 1.5 billion. That's not just food sales. That's childhood memories being manufactured at industrial scale. Now, let's talk about colour psychology, because this is fascinating. Have you ever noticed that almost every major fast food logo uses red, yellow, or both? McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, In-N-Out, KFC, red and yellow everywhere. Why? Because colour psychology research shows that red stimulates appetite and creates a sense of urgency. It raises your heart rate slightly, makes you feel energized, maybe even a little hungry. Yellow, on the other hand, triggers feelings of happiness and friendliness. It's warm, inviting, cheerful. Together, red and yellow create a powerful combination. You feel hungry, happy, and like you need to act now. Fast food companies spent millions researching this. They tested dozens of colour combinations before settling on the ones that produced the strongest subconscious response. Everything you see when you look at a fast food restaurant, the colours, the fonts, the logo design, it's all calculated to influence your behaviour without you realising it. And then there are the jingles. Can you hum the McDonald's jingle right now? Ba-da-ba-ba-ba, ba. I bet you can. That jingle, launched in 2003 with the slogan "I'm loving it," became one of the most recognised sounds in the world. More people can hum that tune than can hum their own national anthem in some countries. Why do jingles work so well? Because music embeds itself in memory differently than words or images. Catchy tune gets stuck in your head. You hum it without thinking, and every time you hum it, you're reinforcing the brand. You're doing McDonald's advertising for them, inside your own mind, for free. Brilliant, diabolical, effective, but fast food marketing goes deeper than just kids and colours and songs. It targets specific emotions and life situations. Think about Taco Bell's late-night marketing. They don't advertise during the day. They advertise after 10 at night, targeting young adults who might be out with friends, maybe coming home from a bar, looking for something cheap and satisfying. The ads are edgy, humorous. They understand their audience. Or think about Wendy's famous "Where's the Beef" campaign from 1984. It wasn't really about the size of hamburger patties. It was tapping into a broader cultural anxiety about things being all style and no substance. The campaign became a national phenomenon. People said, "Where's the beef?" about everything. Politicians used it, comedians used it, and every time someone said it, they were inadvertently advertising for Wendy's. The company had turned a slogan into a cultural meme decades before the internet made memes a thing. Fast food companies also pioneered something called occasion marketing. They don't just want you to eat their food, they want their food to be part of your life events. Think about birthday parties at McDonald's. How many of you had a birthday party there as a kid? Millions of people did. McDonald's created special party packages, a dedicated party room, a host. Ronald McDonald sometimes showed up. Balloons, cake, the whole experience. And what that did was associate McDonald's with celebration, with joy, with special moments. So years later, when you're feeling nostalgic or want to treat yourself, you think of McDonald's not as fast food but as a piece of your happy childhood. That's not marketing, that's memory manipulation. Then there's breakfast. For decades, fast food meant lunch and dinner. But in the 1970s, McDonald's had a problem. Their restaurants sat empty in the morning. That was wasted potential. So they invented the Egg McMuffin, a simple breakfast sandwich that could be made quickly using the same systems they use for burgers. The problem was, Americans didn't think of fast food as breakfast food, so McDonald's launched a massive campaign to change that perception. They advertised heavily. They offered promotions, free coffee with purchase, discounted breakfast combos, and slowly, gradually, they convinced Americans that stopping at McDonald's on the way to work was normal, natural, even smart because you'd save time and still get a hot breakfast. Today, breakfast accounts for roughly 25% of McDonald's sales. That's billions of dollars in revenue that didn't exist before they decided to create a new meal occasion. They didn't just sell a product, they changed behavior. They changed culture. Now let me tell you about something darker. Targeted advertising in low-income neighborhoods. Research has consistently shown that fast food companies disproportionately advertise in poorer areas, particularly communities of color. Billboards for McDonald's and Burger King appear far more frequently in these neighborhoods than in wealthy suburbs. Why? Because the companies know these communities are more vulnerable to their message. People working multiple jobs don't have time to cook. People struggling financially are attracted to cheap, filling food. And children in these neighborhoods often have less access to healthy food options, making them even more susceptible to advertising. This isn't conspiracy theory. This is documented marketing strategy. Fast food companies have explicitly targeted these demographics because they represent reliable repeat customers. Is that evil? Is it just business? I'll let you decide. But it's important to understand that marketing isn't neutral. It's designed to exploit vulnerabilities. And the most vulnerable among us are often the most heavily targeted. There's also the phenomenon of social proof in fast food marketing. Have you noticed how commercials almost never show people eating alone? It's always groups, families laughing together, friends hanging out, couples on dates. The message is clear. Fast food is school, it's communal. It's how normal, happy people spend time together. This taps into a deep human need for belonging. We're social animals. We want to fit in. And when advertising tells us that eating at McDonald's or Taco Bell is what everyone else is doing, we feel social pressure to participate. We don't want to be left out. This is why fast food commercials focus so heavily on imagery of togetherness. They're not selling the food, they're selling the idea that this food will help you connect with others. And in recent years, fast food marketing has become incredibly sophisticated with social media. Companies don't just advertise to you anymore, they engage with you. Wendy's Twitter account is famous for roasting other brands and even roasting customers in funny, viral ways. This creates a personality for the brand. Wendy's isn't a faceless corporation, it's a witty friend who makes you laugh. Taco Bell's Instagram is full of memes and youth culture references. They understand what young people find funny and cool. And by positioning themselves as culturally aware as one of you, they build loyalty that traditional advertising never could. You're not just buying a taco, you're buying into a brand that gets you, that understands your humour, that speaks your language. But perhaps the most insidious marketing tactic is nostalgia. Fast food companies have figured out that if they can make their brand part of your childhood memories, they have you forever. This is why they bring back old menu items from decades ago. McDonald's occasionally brings back the McRib, a sandwich that hasn't been on the regular menu since the 1980s. But people who remember it from their childhood get excited. They tell their friends, they post on social media, they go out their way to buy it. Not because it's delicious, it's mediocre at best, but because it reminds them of being young, of simpler times, of happiness. Fast food companies understand that we don't just eat food. We eat memories, and they've spent billions making sure their products are woven into the fabric of our personal histories. There's also something we need to talk about, and it's uncomfortable. The sexualization of fast food advertising. Carl's Jr. and Hardee's became infamous for commercials featuring models eating burgers in suggestive ways. Burger King ran ads with double entendres about meat and buns. These campaigns were controversial, and they were supposed to be. Controversy creates attention. People talked about the ads, debated whether they were offensive or clever, and all that debate was free publicity. The companies didn't care if you were offended, they cared that you were paying attention, and attention in advertising is everything. This reveals something cynical about modern marketing. Outrage is profitable. Pushing boundaries gets your brand noticed, and once you're noticed, you're already winning. Let me tell you about a study that haunts me. Researchers at Yale showed children two identical meals, one in McDonald's packaging, one in plain packaging. The children consistently said the McDonald's packaged food tasted better, even though the food was exactly the same. Even carrots in a McDonald's bag tasted better to the kids than carrots in a regular bag. Think about what that means. The branding is so powerful that it actually changes the perception of taste. These children had been so thoroughly conditioned by advertising that their brains couldn't separate the product from the packaging. That's not marketing. That's indoctrination. And it starts before kids are old enough to understand they're being manipulated. So what's the solution? Some countries have tried to regulate fast food advertising to children. Sweden and Norway have strict rules about marketing to kids under 12. The UK banned junk food advertising during children's television programs. Some cities in the United States have tried to ban toys in Happy Meals unless the meals meet certain nutritional standards. But these efforts face massive pushback from the industry, because fast food companies know that children are their future. If you can't create lifelong customers by hooking them young, your growth eventually stalls. So they fight these regulations fiercely. They lobby governments. They fund studies claiming advertising doesn't influence children. They argue for freedom of speech and parental responsibility, and often they win. Here's the thing that gets me. None of this is hidden. We all know we're being marketed to. We all understand that commercials are trying to manipulate us, but knowing doesn't make you immune. Those bright colours still grab your attention. Those jingles still get stuck in your head. Those childhood memories still influence your choices. Marketing works even when you know it's marketing. That's how powerful it is. That's how much money and research and psychological expertise has gone into perfecting it. Fast food companies spend billions of dollars every year on advertising. Not millions, billions. Because it works. Because every dollar spent on advertising returns multiple dollars in sales. And because if they can make you feel something, happiness, nostalgia, belonging, hunger, they can make you buy something. But we're reaching a turning point. Younger generations are becoming more skeptical of advertising. They can smell corporate manipulation a mile away. So fast food companies are adapting. They're moving away from traditional advertising and toward influencer partnerships. Viral challenges, sponsored content that doesn't look like advertising. They're getting sneakier, more subtle, more embedded in culture itself, because they have to be. The old methods don't work as well anymore, but the goal remains the same. Get inside your head, make their brand feel like part of your identity, turn you into a customer who doesn't just buy their food but defends their brand, promotes their brand, identifies with their brand. And you know what's wild? It's working. People have McDonald's tattoos. They collect vintage Taco Bell merchandise. They wait in line for hours when a beloved menu item returns. They argue passionately online about which fast food chain is best, as if it's a sports team. The marketing has been so successful that people have incorporated these brands into their sense of self. You're not just a person who occasionally eats at Wendy's. You're a Wendy's person. It's part of who you are. And once a brand achieves that level of loyalty, once it becomes identity, it's almost impossible to dislodge. So where does this leave us? We've seen how fast food companies target children, exploit psychology, manipulate memories, and turn advertising into culture. We've seen how they spend billions to make sure that when you think about food, you think about them. But here's the question nobody wants to ask. If all this marketing is so effective, if it works even on people who know better, what chance do we have? What hope is there for making different choices? For breaking free from these carefully constructed desires? The answer might surprise you. Because for all the power of marketing, for all the billions spent, there's a force even stronger beginning to push back. And that force is also you. The same people who were targeted as children are now becoming parents, workers, citizens, and some of them are starting to ask difficult questions. Starting to resist, starting to say maybe convenience isn't worth the cost. And that resistance, small as it is, has fast food companies more worried than any competitor ever could. We're about to see what happens when the marketed fight back. There's a scene that used to be common in American homes but has almost disappeared. It's around 5:30 in the evening. A mother is in the kitchen, apron on, chopping vegetables. Something is simmering on the stove. The smell fills the house. Children are doing homework at the kitchen table. A father arrives home from work, hangs up his coat and asks what's for dinner. The family sits down together an hour later. They eat, they talk, they connect. This scene, which was normal for generations, for centuries, has become rare, almost extinct. And the reason isn't technology or social change alone, it's fast food. Tonight we're going to explore how convenience slowly, quietly, completely replaced something fundamental to human life. Home cooking, and we need to ask ourselves, what did we gain? And what did we lose? Let me give you some numbers that tell the story. In 1970, Americans spent roughly $6 billion on fast food. By 2000, that number had grown to $110 billion. Let me repeat that, $6 billion to $110 billion in 30 years. That's not just growth, that's a fundamental restructuring of how an entire nation eats. And during those same 30 years, something else happened. The average American family went from spending about 2 hours per day preparing meals to spending less than 30 minutes. 2 hours to 30 minutes. We didn't gradually reduce cooking time, we essentially stopped cooking. And fast food filled that gap. But why? What happened in those 30 years that made home cooking feel impossible? The answer is complicated, but it starts with work. In 1970, roughly 40% of married mothers worked outside the home. By 2000, that number was nearly 70%. Think about what that means for a family. In 1970, most households had someone home during the day who could shop for groceries, prepare ingredients, plan meals. But by 2000, both parents were working full-time. Everyone left the house at 7 in the morning. Everyone came home at 6 or 7 in the evening, exhausted, stressed, and still needing to feed the family. The idea of spending an hour cooking dinner felt absurd, impossible, so families made a trade. They traded home-cooked meals for convenience. And fast food companies were ready and waiting to provide that convenience. But it wasn't just about time, it was also about skill. Cooking is a learned skill passed down through generations. Grandmothers taught mothers, mothers taught daughters and sons. This knowledge transfer happened naturally in the kitchen over years of practice. But when that 1970s generation stopped cooking regularly, they stopped passing down that knowledge. So the children who grew up in the 80s and 90s, many of them never learned to cook. Not really. They might know how to boil pasta or scramble eggs, but the deeper knowledge, how to season properly, how to plan a balanced meal, how to work with raw ingredients, that skill was lost. And when those children became adults and had children of their own, they couldn't teach what they'd never learned. An entire generation grew up thinking cooking was something complicated, something for professionals, something you needed a cookbook or a cooking show to understand, when the reality is, humans have been cooking for hundreds of thousands of years. It's not supposed to be complicated, but we made it so by forgetting how to do it. Let me tell you about a study that breaks my heart. Researchers asked teenagers to identify common vegetables. Many couldn't. They saw a leek and guessed it was a large green onion. They looked at an eggplant and had no idea what it was. These kids weren't stupid, they'd just never seen these vegetables before, because their families didn't buy them, didn't cook with them, ate fast food or processed food instead. And here's the thing, if you don't know what a vegetable is, you're definitely not going to cook with it. This creates a vicious cycle. Parents don't cook, so kids don't learn. Kids grow up and don't cook, so their kids don't learn. Each generation becomes further removed from the basic human activity of preparing food. And fast food companies benefit enormously from this ignorance. Because if you can't cook, you have to buy prepared food. You have no choice. Now, the fast food industry would argue they're providing a service. They'd say, look, modern life is busy. We're giving people what they need. Affordable, quick meals so they can focus on work and family. And there's some truth to that. Fast food did solve a real problem. The problem of time scarcity. But it also created new problems. Problems we're still reckoning with today. Because when you stop cooking at home, you lose control over what goes into your food. You can't control the salt, the sugar, the fat, the additives. You're eating whatever the restaurant decides to serve you. And as we talked about earlier here, what they decide to serve you is engineered to be addictive, not nutritious. There's also an economic dimension to this that's fascinating and depressing. Home cooking is significantly cheaper than eating out. A home-cooked chicken dinner might cost $8 or $10 to feed a family of 4. The same meal at a fast food restaurant costs $25 or $30. So by switching from home cooking to fast food, families are spending 2 or 3 times as much on food. Where does that extra money go? To corporations, to shareholders, to advertising budgets. It's a massive wealth transfer from families to the fast food industry. And the irony is, the families who can least afford it are often the ones most dependent on fast food. Because when you're working multiple jobs and barely making rent, you don't have time to cook. You don't have energy to shop for groceries and meal plan, so you pay the convenience premium, even though it's eating into your already tight budget. It's a poverty trap disguised as a solution. But let's talk about what else disappeared with home cooking. The family dinner table. For most of human history, meals were social events. You sat together, you talked about your day, you argued about things, you laughed, you connected. Anthropologists believe that sharing meals is one of the fundamental ways humans bond. It's how we build relationships, how we transmit values and stories, how we create family identity. But when meals become fast food eaten in the car or in front of the television, that social glue dissolves. Studies have shown that families who eat together regularly have children who perform better in school, have fewer behavioral problems, and report higher levels of happiness. The dinner table isn't just about food, it's about connection, and we gave it up for convenience. There's a woman I want to tell you about. Her name is Betty, and she's 78 years old now. I interviewed her about how food changed during her lifetime. Betty grew up in the 1950s. Her mother cooked every single meal from scratch. Breakfast was oatmeal or eggs. Lunch was sandwiches made that morning. Dinner was meat, vegetables, potatoes, or rice. Nothing fancy, but it was real food. Betty learned to cook by helping her mother. By age 12, she could make a full dinner by herself. When Betty got married in 1968, she cooked the same way her mother had, every night from scratch. But then things started to change. Frozen dinners became popular. TV dinners, they called them. You could heat up a complete meal in 20 minutes. Betty started using them once or twice a week. Then fast food restaurants started appearing everywhere. McDonald's, Burger King, Pizza Hut, so convenient. On nights when she was tired, she'd pick something up on the way home from work. Once a week became twice a week, then 3 times. By the 1980s, Betty realized she was cooking from scratch maybe once or twice a week. Everything else was either fast food or something from a box. And her children, who were teenagers by then, never learned to really cook. Why would they? There was always something easier available. Now Betty is a grandmother, and her grandchildren in their 20s and 30s almost never cook. They survive on delivery apps and drive-thrus, and Betty feels sad about this, though she's not sure why. Because she's the one who started the pattern. She's the one who made the trade. Time for convenience. Connection for efficiency. She didn't mean to. She was just trying to make life easier. But looking back, she wonders if easier was actually better. She told me something I can't forget. She said, "When I cook dinner for my family, I felt like I was doing something important, taking care of them, nourishing them. Now everything feels transactional. You're hungry, here's some food. Next problem, we lost something. I don't know how to get it back. That sense of loss, of something intangible but important slipping away, I think a lot of people feel it, even people who can't quite articulate what's missing. Because home cooking wasn't just about nutrition, it was about care, about love expressed through effort. When someone spends an hour making you dinner, they're saying you matter to me. You're worth my time. But when someone throws a bag of fast food at you, what's the message? You're convenient. You're worth $5.90 of my time. It's not the same. It doesn't feel the same. And I think deep down we all know that. There's also the microwave effect we need to discuss. Microwaves became common in American homes in the 1980s, and food companies immediately started producing microwave-friendly products. Frozen dinners, microwave popcorn, Hot Pockets, all designed to be heated in minutes. This was supposed to be revolutionary, home cooking without the cooking, just heat and eat. But what it actually did was further erode cooking skills. Because microwaving isn't cooking, there's no technique involved, no learning, you just push buttons and wait. So another generation grew up thinking food preparation meant unwrapping something and pressing start. And the food companies that produced these microwave meals made billions. Nestlé, Conagra, Kraft. They weren't in the food business anymore. They were in the convenience business. And business was very, very good. But here's something interesting. The decline of home cooking created a weird paradox. At the same time fewer people were cooking, cooking shows became incredibly popular. In the 2000s, the Food Network exploded. Celebrity chefs became mainstream famous. Gordon Ramsay, Rachel Ray, Bobby Flay, who is here, Bobby Flay. Millions of people watched cooking shows every night, but they weren't watching to learn how to cook, they were watching for entertainment. Cooking had become a spectator sport, something you watch other people do like football or baseball. This created a strange cultural moment where everyone knew who Gordon Ramsay was, but nobody could cook a proper omelette. We fetishized cooking while simultaneously abandoning it. We made it performative instead of practical, and the fast food companies loved this. Because the more intimidating cooking seemed, the more necessary their services became. If cooking is something only trained chefs can do properly, then obviously regular people need to buy prepared food. It's brilliant marketing, really. Make cooking look difficult and time-consuming on television, then offer a simple solution. Just come to our restaurant, we'll handle it, you relax. And people bought it. Literally. Fast food sales continued to climb year after year, even as obesity rates climbed and health problems increased. Because the alternative, cooking at home, felt overwhelming. Let me give you another number that's shocking. In 1970, the average American ate one meal away from home per week. Just one. By 2010, that number had risen to 4 meals per week. 4. More than half of all meals were now being eaten outside the home. That's a complete reversal in just 40 years. We went from eating out being special, something you did on birthdays or anniversaries, to eating out being normal and eating at home being unusual. That's an astonishing cultural shift. And it happened so gradually that most people didn't even notice it was happening. Now, I want to be fair here. Not everyone has the luxury of cooking at home. If you're working 2 jobs just to make rent, if you're a single parent barely keeping things together, if you live in a food desert where fresh ingredients aren't even available, fast food isn't a choice, it's survival. And I'm not judging anyone who relies on it. But for many people, the shift to fast food was a choice, a series of small choices that added up over time. Each individual decision made sense. I'm tired tonight, let's just get McDonald's. I don't feel like cooking, let's order pizza. But those small decisions, repeated thousands of times, reshaped not just individual diets, but entire cultural patterns. We collectively decided that convenience was more important than almost anything else. And we're still living with the consequences of that decision. What's particularly insidious is how this became a class issue. Wealthy families can afford to eat healthy. They have time for grocery shopping and meal prep. They have kitchens with good equipment. They live near stores that sell fresh produce. But poor families often don't have those advantages. They live in neighborhoods where the closest food option is a fast food restaurant. They work long hours that make cooking difficult. They face stress that makes the convenience of fast food incredibly appealing. So the decline of home cooking hits poor communities hardest, and that's not an accident. That's the system working exactly as designed. Extracting money from the people who can least afford it and offering convenience in exchange for health. There's a generational divide here too. Boomers and Gen X often feel guilty about not cooking. They remember their parents cooking. They feel like they should be doing it. But millennials and Gen Z don't have that same reference point. Many of them never experienced regular home-cooked meals growing up, so they don't feel like they're missing anything. To them, eating out or ordering delivery is just normal. It's how food works. And this generational shift makes it even harder to reverse course. Because you can't miss what you never had. You can't long for something you never experienced. But here's the thing. Skills can be relearned. Culture can change. It's not too late. More and more people, particularly younger people, are getting interested in cooking. Not fancy restaurant-style cooking, but simple, practical, healthy cooking. They're learning from YouTube videos and TikTok tutorials. They're discovering that cooking isn't as hard as they thought, that it can actually be relaxing, meditative even, that there's satisfaction in making something with your own hands. And some of them are rediscovering what their grandparents knew, that cooking for someone is an act of love, that sharing a meal you prepared connects you to people in a way that eating fast food never can. The question is whether this small movement can grow large enough to matter, whether enough people will reject convenience culture to change the trajectory we're on. Because right now, fast food still seems like the inevitable future. Kids growing up today eat more fast food than any generation in history. They are more disconnected from food sources, from cooking skills, from the tradition of preparing and sharing meals. If current trends continue, home cooking will become a hobby. A quaint thing some people do, like knitting or woodworking, interesting but not necessary. And fast food will be the default, the norm, the only thing most people know. That the future we want? A future where nobody cooks? Where food comes from corporations instead of kitchens? Where meals are transactions instead of connections? I don't know the answer, but I know it's a question worth asking, because the convenience trap is real. It's easy to fall into, and it's incredibly hard to escape. Once you're used to getting dinner in 5 minutes, the idea of spending an hour cooking feels oppressive. But maybe, just maybe, the hour is worth it. Maybe the time spent cooking, preparing, sharing a meal is time well spent. Maybe convenience isn't actually convenient if it costs us our health, our traditions, our connections to each other. Maybe the real trap isn't cooking. It's believing that not cooking is somehow better. And this brings us to another question. We've talked about how fast food took over American homes. But America wasn't enough. The Golden Arches weren't satisfied with dominating one country. They wanted the world. And they got it. Fast food went global, spreading to every continent, every country, every culture. But when American fast food landed in foreign countries, something interesting happened. It didn't just change how other people ate, it changed their entire cultures, and not everyone was happy about it. We're about to witness how fast food became a symbol of something much bigger than hamburgers, how it became a battlefield in the fight over globalization itself. Imagine waking up in Tokyo, Mumbai, Paris, or Sao Paulo. 4 completely different cities, 4 distinct cultures with thousands of years of culinary tradition, and yet in every single one of these places, within a 5-minute walk, you'll find the same Golden Arches, the same menu, the same taste. How did this happen? How did American fast food, created for American suburbs and American highways, become a global phenomenon? Tonight, we're going to explore one of the most controversial aspects of modern food culture. The moment when fast food stopped being just business and became a symbol of cultural imperialism. When hamburgers became politics, and when eating at McDonald's meant something very different depending on where in the world you were standing. The international expansion of McDonald's began in the 1970s, but it really accelerated in the 80s and 90s, and the strategy was fascinating. McDonald's didn't just drop American restaurants into foreign countries unchanged. They adapted, they localized, they studied each culture carefully, and figured out how to make their brand feel both familiar and exotic at the same time. In India, where most of the population doesn't eat beef for religious reasons, McDonald's introduced the Makaloo Tikki, a burger made with a spiced potato patty. No beef, no pork, completely vegetarian. In Japan, they created the teriyaki burger. In the Philippines, they serve McSpaghetti, spaghetti with a sweet tomato sauce. In the Middle East, you can get a macarabia, flatbread filled with grilled chicken or beef. McDonald's became a chameleon, changing its colours to match local tastes while keeping its core identity intact. But this adaptation strategy revealed something interesting about globalization. McDonald's was simultaneously homogenizing global culture and respecting local differences. They were saying, we're a global brand, but we understand you're different. You can eat our food without betraying your culture. In fact, you can eat food that's uniquely yours while still being part of the McDonald's experience. This was brilliant marketing. It made McDonald's feel less like an American invader and more like a global citizen. But critics saw something darker. They argued that McDonald's wasn't respecting local cultures, it was co-opting them, taking traditional flavors and ingredients and repackaging them as fast food, stripping them of context and meaning. A Makaloo tikki isn't real Indian food, critics said. It's Indian flavor filtered through American efficiency. It's cultural appropriation disguised as cultural sensitivity. Let me tell you about a sociologist named George Ritzer. In 1993, he published a book called The McDonaldization of Society, and this book became incredibly influential because it articulated what a lot of people were feeling but couldn't quite express. Ritzer argued that the principles of fast food restaurants, efficiency, calculability, predictability, and control were spreading beyond restaurants into every aspect of modern life. Schools were becoming McDonaldized, focusing on standardized tests rather than creative learning. Hospitals were becoming McDonaldized, processing patients as quickly as possible rather than providing personalized care. Even relationships were becoming McDonaldized, with dating apps turning romance into an efficient matching system. Ritzer wasn't just criticizing hamburgers, he was criticizing an entire worldview, the belief that everything should be fast, standardized, and controllable. And he argued that McDonald's was the symbol, the physical embodiment of this worldview spreading across the globe, and people resisted, violently sometimes. In 1999, a French farmer named José Bové became famous for leading an attack on a McDonald's restaurant in southern France. He and his fellow farmers dismantled the restaurant with tractors and tools. It was deliberate, symbolic. They weren't just angry at McDonald's, they were angry at what McDonald's represented. American cultural dominance, the industrialization of food, the death of traditional farming and cooking. Bové was arrested and became a folk hero in France. People wore t-shirts supporting him, intellectuals wrote essays defending him, and McDonald's became a lightning rod for anti-globalization sentiment. If you were against American influence, against capitalism, against the homogenization of culture, you were against McDonald's. And in some places, you showed that opposition through violence. McDonald's restaurants have been attacked in dozens of countries, bombed in Colombia, vandalized in Greece, set on fire in Russia, protested in India. In China, during periods of tension with the United States, McDonald's restaurants became targets for nationalist anger. People smashed windows, spray-painted anti-American slogans, refused to eat there as a matter of principle. And McDonald's had to navigate this carefully, because they were selling more than burgers. They were selling America, American culture, American values, American capitalism, and not everyone wanted what they were selling. But here's what's fascinating. Despite all the protests and violence and intellectual criticism, McDonald's kept growing internationally. Today, McDonald's operates in over 100 countries. They serve 69 million customers every single day globally. In some countries, McDonald's is more popular than it is in America. The protest didn't stop expansion. If anything, the controversy made McDonald's more visible, more talked about, and some people, particularly younger people in developing countries, ate at McDonald's precisely because it was controversial. It was rebellious. Eating a Big Mac was a way of saying, I'm modern, I'm global, I'm not bound by old traditions. It was cultural rebellion wrapped in a sesame seed bun. There's a concept in sociology called the Golden Arches theory of conflict prevention. It was proposed by a journalist named Thomas Friedman in 1999. The theory suggested that no two countries with McDonald's restaurants had ever gone to war with each other. The idea was that once a country became developed enough to support McDonald's, once it was integrated enough into the global economy, war became economically irrational. This theory became famous. People loved it because it suggested that capitalism and globalization created peace, that hamburgers, of all things, were making the world safer. But the theory was wrong. Countries with McDonald's have gone to war. Russia and Georgia both had McDonald's when they fought in 2008. Israel and Lebanon, India and Pakistan. The golden arches don't prevent conflict, they're just buildings. But the theory revealed something important about how we think about fast food. We've imbued it with meaning far beyond what it actually is. McDonald's became a symbol of progress, of peace, of modernity. And when that symbolism collided with reality, things got complicated. Let me tell you about the opening of the first McDonald's in Moscow, January 31st, 1990. The Cold War was ending. The Soviet Union was collapsing, and McDonald's opened its first restaurant in Pushkin Square. 30,000 people stood in line that day. 30,000. Some waited 6 hours just to get inside, and when they finally got their food, many of them cried. Not because the food was delicious, it was just a hamburger, but because the opening of McDonald's meant something. It meant the Cold War was really over. It meant Russia was joining the global economy. It meant they could have what Americans had. For Russians who'd grown up in a system of scarcity and restrictions, that hamburger represented freedom. Choice. The West. It's almost impossible to overstate how emotional that day was for many people. A hamburger became hope. But fast forward to 2022, and McDonald's leaving Russia because of the war in Ukraine carried the opposite symbolism. When McDonald's announced they were closing all 850 Russian locations and selling their Russian business, it was a statement, an economic sanction, a declaration that Russia was no longer part of the global community. Russians who'd grown up with McDonald's, who'd made it part of their lives, suddenly lost access to it. And some of them felt that loss deeply, not because they couldn't get a Big Mac, but because it meant isolation, being cut off from the world. The Golden Arches had become more than a restaurant. They'd become a barometer of international standing. If you had McDonald's, you were connected to the global economy. If you didn't, you were outside it. This brings us to something I find really troubling. The way fast food companies have used religious and cultural adaptations to expand into sensitive markets. In Israel, there are kosher McDonald's restaurants that close on the Sabbath and serve kosher meat. In Muslim countries, all McDonald's serve halal meat and don't offer pork products. These adaptations show respect for local customs, sure, but they also show how capitalism can absorb and commodify anything. Religion, tradition, culture, it all becomes material for market expansion. There's something unsettling about that. About the fact that McDonald's can make itself compatible with virtually any belief system, because at the end of the day, belief systems are just markets. Populations with money who need to eat. The spiritual becomes economic. The sacred becomes profitable. But I want to share a different perspective. I talked to a woman named Priya who lives in Mumbai. She's 28, works in tech, and she eats at McDonald's regularly. And she had an interesting take on the cultural imperialism argument. She said, when critics say McDonald's is destroying Indian culture, they're kind of assuming Indian culture is fragile, like it can't survive contact with Western food. But I eat McDonald's and I also eat my grandmother's cooking. I can enjoy both. Having more choices doesn't erase the old ones, it just adds to them. And she made a point that I think is important. Maybe the problem isn't that global brands exist. Maybe the problem is assuming that people can't navigate multiple cultures simultaneously, that they're either traditional or modern, local or global, when in reality most people are both. They code switch between identities depending on context, And that's not confusion, that's sophistication. But there's still something to the criticism, because while individuals might be able to navigate multiple cultural identities, there are real economic consequences to fast food globalization. When a McDonald's opens in a small town anywhere in the world, it doesn't just add a choice, it competes with local restaurants. And McDonald's has advantages local businesses don't have: international supply chains, marketing budgets, brand recognition, economies of scale. So local restaurants often can't compete, they close. And when they close, something is lost. Not just businesses, but recipes, techniques, food traditions that might have been passed down for generations. This is what anthropologists call cultural erosion, the slow replacement of diverse local cultures with a homogeneous global culture. And fast food is one of the main drivers of that erosion. Let me give you a specific example. In Okinawa, Japan, there's a traditional diet that's been studied extensively because Okinawans historically lived longer than almost anyone else on Earth. Their diet was based on sweet potatoes, vegetables, fish, and very little meat. It was simple, healthy, balanced. But after American military bases were established in Okinawa following World War II, American food culture, including fast food, became prevalent. Today, Okinawa has one of the highest obesity rates in Japan. The traditional diet has been largely abandoned, especially by younger generations who grew up eating American-style food. Life expectancy in Okinawa is now declining relative to the rest of Japan. That's not just a changing cuisine, that's a public health crisis, and it's directly traceable to the introduction of Western fast food culture. You could argue people chose to eat differently, that it's their right, and you'd be correct, but you'd also have to acknowledge the cost of that choice. There's also an interesting paradox in how fast food companies market themselves internationally versus in America. In America, fast food is cheap, low status, working class. But in many developing countries, eating at McDonald's is aspirational. It's expensive relative to local food. It's seen as sophisticated, modern, upper class. So the same corporation that represents lowbrow food culture in one country represents highbrow food culture in another. This shows how completely arbitrary these meanings are. How much of what we think about food is actually about identity and status rather than the food itself. And yet, despite everything I've said, there's something undeniably impressive about McDonald's global success. They've managed to create a product that works in virtually every cultural context. That satisfies something universal in human taste preferences that can be produced consistently across wildly different economies and infrastructures. That's not easy. That's actually remarkable. You might disagree with their methods, you might hate what they represent, but you have to admit they figured something out about human behavior and global business that few other companies have matched. They created a truly universal product. And universality, for better or worse, is powerful. There's one more aspect we need to discuss: environmental impact. As fast food went global, so did the agricultural systems required to support it. McDonald's needs millions of tons of beef, potatoes, and wheat every year. To supply that, forests have been cleared in Brazil for cattle ranching. Water tables have been depleted in India for potato farming. Industrial agriculture has expanded across the developing world, often at enormous environmental cost. And local ecosystems have been disrupted to feed global supply chains. So when you eat a Big Mac in Berlin or Beijing, you're not just participating in American food culture. You're participating in a global system of resource extraction that has profound environmental consequences. The Golden Arches cast a long shadow, longer than most people realize. So what's the verdict on fast food globalization? Is it cultural imperialism or cultural exchange? Is it destroying traditions or expanding choices? Is it making the world more connected or more homogeneous? The answer, frustratingly, is all of the above. It's complicated, messy, full of contradictions, just like everything else in modern life. Fast food went global not through military force, but through economic appeal. People chose it. But those choices were shaped by marketing, by economics, by the unequal power dynamics between wealthy and developing nations. So it's both voluntary and coerced, both welcomed and resisted, both progressive and destructive. And trying to reduce it to simple good or bad misses the complexity of what actually happened. The world became smaller, and in that smaller world, the Golden Arches became a landmark everyone recognized. Whether they loved it or hated it, whether they ate there or protested it, McDonald's became a permanent part of the global landscape. For better and for worse, we all live in McDonaldland now. But here's the thing about building a global empire on convenience and efficiency and standardized products. Eventually someone asks the hard questions, questions about health, about what all those cheap, fast, engineered foods are actually doing to human bodies. For decades those questions were whispered, ignored, dismissed. But then came evidence. Scientific evidence, medical evidence, evidence that was impossible to ignore. And suddenly the bill came due. The health crisis that fast food had been quietly creating for 50 years exploded into public consciousness. And people started asking, was it worth it? Was convenience worth this cost? We're about to find out what happened when the truth about fast food and health became undeniable. In 2004, a 33-year-old filmmaker named Morgan Spurlock did something that sounds absolutely insane. He decided to eat nothing but McDonald's food for 30 consecutive days, 3 meals a day, every single day, breakfast, lunch and dinner from McDonald's, and he filmed the entire experiment. The documentary was called Super Size Me, and it became a cultural phenomenon. But more importantly, it became a turning point. The moment when America and the world could no longer pretend that fast food was harmless. Tonight we're diving into the uncomfortable truth about what fast food has done to human health. And I want to warn you, this part of the story isn't easy to hear. Because it's not abstract, it's not theoretical. It's about real bodies, real suffering. Real people whose lives were shortened because of choices that didn't always feel like choices. Let's start with Morgan Spurlock. When he began his experiment, he was healthy. He weighed 185 pounds. His cholesterol was normal. His liver function was normal. His doctors examined him and found nothing wrong. But after just 5 days of eating only McDonald's, strange things started happening. He felt lethargic, depressed. His heart started experiencing palpitations. After 2 weeks, doctors became concerned. His liver enzymes were elevated, showing signs of damage similar to an alcoholic. His cholesterol had skyrocketed. He'd gained 14 pounds, and he reported feeling addicted to the food. He'd wake up feeling terrible, eat McDonald's and feel better temporarily, then crash again. It was a classic addiction cycle. By the end of 30 days, Morgan had gained 24.5 pounds. His body fat percentage had increased from 11% to 18%. His cholesterol went from 165 to 230, and his doctors were genuinely worried about permanent liver damage. They begged him to stop the experiment early, but he continued. And when it was over, it took him 14 months to lose the weight he'd gained in 30 days. 14 months to undo 30 days of damage. Now, critics of the documentary argue that nobody eats like that. Nobody eats fast food 3 times a day every day, and that's fair. But here's what they missed. Millions of people do eat fast food multiple times per week, every week, for years, for decades. And the cumulative effect of that, while slower than Morgan's extreme experiment, is just as damaging. The documentary wasn't meant to show normal eating habits, it was meant to show what fast food does to your body when consumed regularly. And the message was clear. This food is poison, maybe not immediately lethal, but toxic nonetheless. And your body can only process so much of it before it starts breaking down. The obesity statistics tell a story that's almost too big to comprehend. In 1970, around the time fast food was just starting to become ubiquitous, the obesity rate in America was roughly 15%. Not great, but manageable. By 2000, it had more than doubled to 30%. Today, it's over 40%. Let me say that again. Over 40% of American adults are obese. Not just overweight, obese. That's a medical term meaning a body mass index over 30, which corresponds to significant health risks. And childhood obesity has followed the same trajectory. In 1970, 5% of children were obese. Today, it's nearly 20%. 1 in 5 American children is obese. And this correlates almost perfectly with the rise of fast food consumption. As fast food sales increased, so did obesity. The correlation isn't just suggestive, it's overwhelming. And obesity isn't just about appearance or social stigma, it's about health consequences that are devastating. Obesity dramatically increases your risk of type 2 diabetes, heart disease, stroke, certain cancers, sleep apnea, joint problems, and a dozen other conditions. It shortens your lifespan by an average of 6 to 14 years depending on severity, and the healthcare costs are staggering. America spends roughly $170 billion per year treating obesity-related conditions. That's more than the entire gross domestic product of many countries, spent every single year treating a condition that's largely preventable. And a significant portion of that obesity is directly attributable to fast food consumption. Studies have shown that people who eat fast food more than twice per week have significantly higher rates of weight gain and insulin resistance compared to people who eat it rarely or never. The evidence is conclusive. Fast food makes people sick. But let's talk about something specific that made people very angry. Trans fats. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, research started showing that trans fats, which were commonly used in fast food cooking, were extraordinarily bad for you. They raised bad cholesterol, lowered good cholesterol, and dramatically increased heart disease risk. And guess where trans fats were everywhere? Fast food restaurants. French fries were fried in oil containing trans fats. Burgers were cooked on grills greased with trans fats. Baked goods and desserts were loaded with them. Fast food companies had been using trans fats for decades because they were cheap and increased shelf life, but they were literally killing people. In 2006, a public health advocacy group called the Center for Science in the Public Interest sued KFC for using trans fats. The lawsuit got massive media attention. People were outraged. How could these companies knowingly serve food that was so harmful? And here's the thing, the companies did know. Internal documents showed that food scientists had warned executives about trans fats as early as the 1980s. But the companies continued using them anyway because changing would be expensive, reformulating products, retooling kitchens, testing new oils. It was cheaper to keep serving harmful food than to make it safer. Eventually, public pressure became too great. McDonald's announced in 2002 that they would eliminate trans fats, but then they delayed implementation for years. Other chains followed slowly, reluctantly. It wasn't until 2015 that the Food and Drug Administration finally banned trans fats in food entirely. But by then, millions of people had consumed them for decades. How many heart attacks could have been prevented if fast food companies had acted when they first learned trans fats were dangerous? We'll never know, but it's worth asking. let me tell you about a lawsuit that changed everything. In 2002, a lawyer named Samuel Hirsch filed a class action lawsuit against McDonald's on behalf of several obese teenagers. The lawsuit claimed that McDonald's had knowingly served unhealthy food, that they'd marketed aggressively to children, and that they were responsible for the plaintiff's obesity and health problems. The lawsuit was dismissed. The judge ruled that individuals are responsible for their own food choices. But something interesting happened. The publicity from the lawsuit forced McDonald's to make changes. They added salads to the menu. They started posting calorie information. They introduced apple slices in Happy Meals. And most famously, they eliminated the supersize option in 2004. That's right. The largest drink and fry sizes were removed from the menu entirely because of pressure from the lawsuit and the bad publicity from Supersize Me. So even though the plaintiffs lost in court, they won in the arena of public opinion. They forced changes that made fast food slightly less harmful. But here's what frustrates me. The industry's response to criticism hasn't been to make food significantly healthier. It's been to offer healthier options while keeping the unhealthy ones. McDonald's added salads, but the salads often have as many calories and as much fat as a burger once you add dressing. They added fruit, but the Happy Meals still come with fries and soda if you want them. They posted calorie counts, but they know most people ignore them. It's what's called health washing, creating the appearance of health consciousness without fundamentally changing the product. And it works. It gives consumers the illusion of choice and responsibility, while the core business model remains unchanged. Sell cheap, calorie-dense, highly processed food in large quantities. The salads and apple slices are fig leaves. Marketing tools, not genuine attempts to improve public health. There's another dimension to this that's particularly cruel. Fast food companies disproportionately market unhealthy products in low-income neighborhoods and communities of color. We touched on this earlier, but it's worth repeating. Research has documented that predominantly Black and Latino neighborhoods have more fast food restaurants per capita than white neighborhoods. That advertising for fast food is more prevalent in these communities, that promotions and discounts are targeted specifically to these demographics, and as a result, obesity rates and diet-related diseases are significantly higher in these communities. This isn't accidental. This is deliberate targeting of vulnerable populations, and the health consequences are profound. Black Americans have higher rates of diabetes, hypertension, and heart disease than white Americans, and diet is a major contributing factor. Fast food companies are profiting from this disparity. They're making money by selling products that are making specific communities sick. That's not just bad business ethics, that's a social justice issue. Let me share some numbers that should make you angry. The average American now consumes approximately 2,500 calories per day. That's about 500 calories more than recommended. And a significant portion of those excess calories come from fast food and processed foods. A single Big Mac meal with large fries and a large Coke contains approximately 1,350 calories. That's more than half your daily caloric needs in one meal. But it doesn't feel like that much food because it's calorie-dense and nutrient-poor. You eat it. You feel full for an hour. Then you're hungry again. So you eat more. And the cycle continues. This is why people can eat fast food regularly and still feel hungry. The food is designed to be calorically dense but not satiating. It's engineered for overconsumption. And then there's the sodium. A Big Mac contains approximately 960 milligrams of sodium. The American Heart Association recommends no more than 2,300 milligrams per day, ideally 1,500. So one hamburger gives you nearly half your daily sodium in a single item. Add fries, which contain another 300 milligrams, and you're well over half your daily limit in one meal. High sodium intake contributes to hypertension, which leads to heart disease and stroke, which are the leading causes of death in America. Fast food companies know this. They know their products are too salty. But salt is addictive. It makes food taste better. It makes you thirsty, so you buy drinks. So they keep the sodium high. Your health is less important than their profit margins. There's a particularly disturbing study I want to mention. Researchers found that children who eat fast food regularly have lower test scores in reading, math, and science compared to children who rarely eat it. The effect persisted even after controlling for socioeconomic status, parental education, and other factors. Why? Possibly because the poor nutritional quality of fast food affects brain development and cognitive function. Your brain needs specific nutrients, omega-3 fatty acids, vitamins, minerals, to function optimally. Fast food doesn't provide those nutrients. It provides empty calories. So children eating fast food regularly are essentially malnourished even while being overfed. Their bodies have plenty of energy, but their brains are starving for the nutrients they need to develop properly. This isn't speculation. This is documented science. And it should horrify us that we're allowing an entire generation to grow up eating food that's making them less intelligent. Now, I want to be balanced here. Not all the blame falls on fast food companies. Individuals do make choices. Parents do decide what to feed their children. Nobody is forced to eat fast food. But here's the problem with the personal responsibility argument. It ignores power dynamics. It ignores that these companies spend billions on marketing designed to influence behavior. It ignores that many people live in food deserts where healthy options simply aren't available or affordable. It ignores that these products are engineered to be addictive. Saying it's all about personal choice is like saying smoking is about personal choice. Technically true, but it ignores that tobacco companies spent decades making cigarettes as addictive as possible and marketing them aggressively. We recognized that was wrong. We sued tobacco companies. We restricted their advertising. We taxed their products. Why haven't we done the same with fast food? Because people need to eat, and the line between food and harmful substance is blurrier. But the harm is real. The deaths are real. The suffering is real. Let me tell you about something that happened in 2019. The American Medical Association officially recognized obesity as a disease. Not a lifestyle choice, not a personal failing, a disease. This was significant because it shifted the conversation from morality to medicine. Obesity isn't about being lazy or lacking willpower. It's about metabolic dysfunction, hormonal imbalances, and environmental factors. And fast food is one of the primary environmental factors. Calling obesity a disease meant acknowledging that treating it requires more than telling people to eat less and exercise more. It requires addressing the systems that make people sick. And fast food companies are a big part of those systems. They create environments, what public health experts call obesogenic environments, that promote weight gain and poor health. So what do we do about this? Some countries have implemented policies that America has resisted. Mexico imposed a tax on sugary drinks and saw soda consumption decline. Chile banned cartoon characters on unhealthy food packaging marketed to children. The UK banned junk food advertising during children's television programming. These policies work. They reduce consumption of unhealthy foods, especially among children. But in America, similar proposals face fierce opposition from the food industry. They argue it's government overreach, that it infringes on freedom, that people should decide for themselves what to eat. And Americans, with our cultural emphasis on individual liberty, often agree we'd rather have freedom and obesity than regulation and health. Maybe that's the right trade-off, maybe not. But we should at least be honest about what we're choosing. The health crisis caused by fast food is ongoing. It's getting worse, not better. Despite increased awareness, despite documentaries and books and news reports, fast food consumption continues to rise. People know it's bad for them. They eat it anyway. Why? Because it's convenient. Because it's cheap. Because they're tired and stressed, and it offers temporary comfort. Because it's everywhere and the alternatives require time and money and skills that many people don't have. The system is designed to make unhealthy choices the easy choices, and changing that system, that's the real challenge. That's what we should be focused on. Not blaming individuals for failing to resist, but changing the environment so that healthy choices are the default instead of the exception. And here's the truly frightening part. Everything we've discussed, the obesity, the diabetes, the heart disease, the cognitive effects, that's just what we know about now. There are emerging concerns about fast food's impact on mental health, on gut microbiome health, on immune function, on hormone regulation. We're only beginning to understand the full scope of what a diet dominated by ultra-processed, hyper-palatable food does to human bodies over the long term. And the preliminary research is alarming. We might be looking at health consequences that won't fully manifest for another generation. Problems we can't even predict yet. Because humans evolved to eat whole foods, plants, animals, natural fats. We did not evolve to eat chemically engineered products designed in laboratories to maximize palatability and profit. Our bodies don't know what to do with this stuff, and we're discovering that in real time using an entire population as test subjects. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom. Sometimes that's when change finally becomes possible. Sometimes the crisis has to get bad enough, visible enough, undeniable enough before people are willing to do something about it. And we're reaching that point. The health costs of fast food are becoming impossible to ignore. Healthcare systems are straining under the weight of treating preventable diseases. Families are watching loved ones get sick and die from conditions that didn't exist at these rates 50 years ago. And people are starting to ask, does it have to be this way? And the answer is no, it doesn't. We built this system. We can change it. But change requires first understanding what we're changing from and where we're trying to go. And that's where our story takes an unexpected turn. Because just when it seemed like fast food had won, when convenience and profit had triumphed completely over health and tradition, something new started happening. Technology, which had been fast food's greatest ally, suddenly became a double-edged sword. And it's created possibilities and problems that nobody could have predicted. Picture this. It's 10 o'clock at night. You're sitting on your couch in your pajamas scrolling through your phone. You're not particularly hungry, but you're bored, tired, maybe a little stressed from the day, and then you open an app. DoorDash, Uber Eats, Grubhub, whatever. And suddenly, every restaurant in your city is at your fingertips. You can see photos of the food, read reviews, order with 3 taps, and 20 minutes later someone brings it directly to your door. You don't even have to put on shoes. It's magical. It's convenient beyond anything humans have ever experienced. And it might be the most dangerous evolution of fast food yet. Tonight we're exploring how technology has made fast food not just convenient but inescapable, how it's created a new form of addiction, and how we might be approaching a tipping point where convenience stops being helpful and becomes harmful. Food delivery isn't new. Pizza places have been delivering for decades, Chinese restaurants too, but those services were limited. You called, you ordered from a menu you probably had sitting in a drawer, and you waited. It was convenient, sure, but it required effort. You had to know what you wanted. You had to speak to a person, and delivery was usually limited to certain types of food. But around 2015, everything changed. Smartphone apps made food delivery frictionless, universal, available for virtually any restaurant. And suddenly, Eating at home didn't require cooking or even leaving your house. It just required a phone and a credit card. And Americans, exhausted from work, seduced by convenience, adopted these apps with stunning speed. By 2019, the online food delivery industry in the United States was generating over $10 billion in revenue annually. $10 billion. That made it larger than most restaurant chains. If food delivery were a restaurant company, it would be the 5th largest in the country. And that was before the pandemic. When COVID hit in 2020 and restaurants closed their dining rooms, delivery apps exploded. People who had never used them before suddenly had no choice, and once they started, many never stopped. Even after restaurants reopened, delivery remained popular, because people had gotten used to it. They'd experienced the ultimate convenience. And it's very hard to go back once you've tasted that level of ease. But here's what makes delivery apps so insidious. They're not just convenient. They're designed, engineered actually, to make you order more than you intended. Let me explain how this works. When you open a delivery app, you're immediately shown food. Beautiful, professionally photographed food, burgers glistening with juice, pizza with perfectly melted cheese, desserts that look like art. This isn't accidental. The apps use photos specifically chosen to trigger cravings, and the interface is designed using what's called dark patterns. Design choices that manipulate you into spending more money. For example, the default options are always set to maximize your order. Suggested tips start at 20% or higher. Add-ons and extras are pre-selected or prominently featured. Free delivery requires a minimum order that's just slightly higher than what you plan to spend, so you add another item. Every element is calculated to increase your total. And it works. Studies show people spend 30 to 50% more when ordering through apps compared to ordering directly from restaurants. Then there's the algorithm. These apps track everything you do, what you browse, what you linger on, what you order, what time you order, and they use that data to predict what you'll want and when you'll want it. So the app starts sending you notifications. Push notifications at exactly the moment you're most likely to be hungry or bored or vulnerable. 6 o'clock on a Tuesday evening, 10:30 on Friday night, Sunday afternoon. The app knows when you're weak, and it tempts you with personalized suggestions. Your favorite restaurant has a promotion. There's a new place that serves food similar to what you ordered last week. Free delivery for the next hour. These notifications are incredibly effective because they're timed and tailored. It's not random advertising. It's behavioral targeting based on your own patterns. The app knows you better than you know yourself, and it uses that knowledge to sell you more food. And here's something really troubling. Delivery apps have made impulse eating dramatically easier. In the past, if you wanted fast food, you had to get dressed, get in your car, drive somewhere, and pick it up. That friction, that effort gave you time to reconsider. To think, do I really want this? Is it worth it? But with delivery apps, there's no friction, no pause. You feel the craving, you open the app, you order, and it's done. The gap between desire and action is seconds. And as we discussed earlier, that instant gratification is part of what makes things addictive. The faster you can satisfy a craving, the more likely you are to develop compulsive behavior around it. Delivery apps have reduced the barrier to eating fast food to almost zero. That's dangerous, because it removes the natural checks that used to limit consumption. Let me tell you about a concept called decision fatigue. Every day you make thousands of decisions. What to wear, what to work on, what to say in meetings. Each decision uses mental energy, and by the end of the day you're exhausted. Your willpower is depleted, and that's exactly when delivery apps target you. When you're tired and your defenses are down, the app makes eating unhealthy food the easiest possible choice. One tap to reorder what you had last time. Suggested restaurants based on your preferences. Pre-saved payment information. You barely have to think. And when you're tired, not having to think is incredibly appealing. So you order, again and again, and each time you're reinforcing the habit, making it more automatic, more compulsive, until checking the delivery app becomes something you do without even deciding to do it. It's just what you do when you're bored or tired or stressed. It becomes a reflex. That's not using an app. That's being used by an app. There's also something called ghost kitchens that we need to talk about. These are commercial cooking facilities that exist only to prepare food for delivery. They have no dining room, no storefront, no physical presence you can visit. They're just kitchens, often multiple brands operating out of the same space, churning out food for delivery apps. And this has created a weird situation where you might order from what looks like 5 different restaurants, but it's all coming from the same kitchen, the same chef, the same ingredients, just branded differently. It's restaurant as illusion. And some ghost kitchens are owned by celebrities or influencers who license their name but have no involvement in the actual food. You're not eating food the celebrity made or even designed. You're eating food that's using their name for marketing. Its authenticity as commodity. Everything about it feels fake, manufactured. But people order from these places because the marketing works, because the photos look good, because the delivery app makes it easy, and because at the end of the day, people are hungry and tired and want something fast. The pandemic accelerated all of this. In 2020, when lockdowns began, delivery apps became essential infrastructure. Restaurants survived because of them, people ate because of them, and the apps themselves became massively profitable. DoorDash went public in December 2020 with a valuation of over $60 billion. $60 billion. For a company that doesn't make food, doesn't own restaurants, just connects customers with delivery drivers. That valuation tells you something about how valuable convenience has become, how much people are willing to pay for not having to leave their homes, and the apps have used that power to extract fees from everyone in the system. They charge restaurants 20 to 30% commissions. They charge customers service fees and delivery fees. They pay drivers minimal wages and no benefits. Everyone gets squeezed. But the convenience is so appealing that everyone keeps participating. Restaurants can't afford not to be on the apps because that's where customers are. Customers can't resist the ease. Drivers need the income. It's a system where nobody's happy but nobody can leave. Now, let's talk about the social implications, because delivery apps have done something strange to how we relate to food and to each other. Eating used to be social. You went out to restaurants with friends. You cooked for family. Even fast food, you at least went to the restaurants or other people, interacted with staff. But delivery apps eliminate all of that. You order alone. You eat alone. You don't see the person who cooked your food. You barely interact with the delivery driver. Maybe just open the door, take the bag and close it again. The entire transaction is isolated, atomized. You're alone with your phone and your food. And that isolation, I think, is part of the appeal. After a long day of dealing with people, the idea of not having to interact with anyone to get dinner is relieving. But it's also sad. Because we're social animals, we need connection. And when we replace social meals with solitary delivery, we lose something important. We lose the chance to talk, to share, to be present with others. Food becomes fuel consumed in private rather than an experience shared with community. There's also an environmental cost that nobody wants to talk about. Every delivery generates waste. Plastic containers, plastic utensils, plastic bags, paper bags, napkins, condiment packets, all of it single use, all of it trash, and multiply that by the millions of deliveries happening every day, and you have an environmental disaster. Landfills filling with food containers, oceans filling with plastic. And that's not even counting the carbon emissions from all the driving. Thousands of drivers, engines running, burning gas, circling neighborhoods to deliver food that could have been picked up in a single trip to a restaurant. It's incredibly inefficient, incredibly wasteful. But convenience trumps environment. People know delivery is wasteful. They order anyway, because it's easy, because they're tired, because the consequences feel distant and abstract while the convenience is immediate and tangible. Let me share a story that I find troubling. A friend of mine, I'll call him Alex, started using delivery apps during the pandemic. He was working from home, stressed, lonely, and ordering food became a comfort, a small pleasure in a difficult time. At first it was once or twice a week. Then it became daily, then multiple times a day. He'd order breakfast, then lunch, then dinner, sometimes a snack in between. He stopped cooking entirely, stopped grocery shopping. His entire diet came from delivery apps. And here's the thing, Alex knew it was unhealthy. He knew he was spending way too much money. He knew the food wasn't good for him, but he couldn't stop. The apps were always there, always available, always offering exactly what he wanted with minimal effort. He tried deleting the apps from his phone, but he had reinstalled them within a day. He tried setting limits, but he'd ignore them. He was, by any reasonable definition, addicted. And when I talked to him about it, he said something that stuck with me. He said, "It's not about the food, it's about not having to try. Everything else in my life requires effort, but this doesn't, and that's what I need. The absence of effort, that's what I'm addicted to." And I think Alex's experience is more common than we'd like to admit. Delivery apps offer not just food, but relief. Relief from decision-making, from cooking, from social interaction, from leaving your house, from trying. And in a world that demands constant effort and performance, that relief is intoxicating. The apps aren't just selling food, they're selling the absence of burden. And that's incredibly powerful, especially for people who are already overwhelmed, already exhausted, already barely holding things together. For them, delivery apps aren't a convenience, they're a necessity, a coping mechanism, and that's exactly why they're so profitable and so dangerous. But here's where things get really interesting. Some people are starting to push back, not against delivery apps specifically, but against the entire culture of convenience that they represent. People are starting to ask, what are we giving up in exchange for this ease? What are we losing? And those questions are leading to something unexpected. A resistance movement. People choosing difficulty, choosing effort, choosing slowness. Not because it's easier, but because it's better. Because they've realized that the fast, convenient, easy path isn't actually making them happy. It's making them numb, isolated, unhealthy. And they want something different, something more real. There's a growing number of people, particularly young people, who are deliberately choosing to cook their own food. Shop at farmers' markets, eat seasonally, avoid delivery apps entirely. Not because they can't afford them, but because they reject what they represent. They reject the idea that speed and convenience are the most important values. They reject the isolation of eating alone from a disposable container. They want connection. They want to know where their food comes from. They want the satisfaction of making something with their own hands. And this movement, small as it is, represents a fundamental challenge to everything we've been discussing. Because if people start choosing effort over convenience, if they start prioritizing health and connection over speed and ease, the entire fast food industry has a problem, a big problem. And that brings us to an important question. Have we reached peak convenience? Is there a limit to how convenient things can get before people start pushing back? I think we might be approaching that limit. Because delivery apps have revealed something important. They've shown us what happens when convenience is taken to its logical extreme, when every barrier is removed, when every friction is eliminated. And what happens is life becomes kind of empty. Eating becomes joyless, a transaction, a necessity serviced by an app. There's no ritual, no anticipation, no satisfaction, just consumption. And I think people are starting to realize that maybe that's not what they want. Maybe convenience pushed too far stops being a benefit and becomes a problem. Maybe we need friction. Maybe we need effort. Maybe difficulty is actually valuable. And if enough people reach that conclusion, everything changes. But we're not there yet. Most people are still ordering, still swiping, still choosing convenience. The apps are still growing, still profitable, still expanding into new markets and new services. They're not going anywhere, at least not anytime soon. But there's a crack in the foundation, a small but growing number of people saying, "No thank you, I'll cook for myself, I'll walk to the restaurant, I'll choose effort." And that crack, if it grows, could eventually break the entire system, could force a reckoning with the convenience culture that's dominated for so long. We're at an inflection point, and which direction we go, toward more convenience or toward more intentionality, that's still being decided, right now, by all of us. Every time we choose to open an app or choose to cook instead, we're voting, we're shaping the future. And the stakes are higher than most people realize. Because this isn't just about food, it's about how we want to live, what we value, what kind of society we want to build. Do we want a world of maximum convenience and minimum effort, where everything is delivered, where nobody has to try, where isolation is the default? Or do we want something different, something harder but more meaningful? Those are the questions we're wrestling with, and the answers will determine not just what we eat, but who we become. And interestingly, some of the people leading this resistance, this rejection of convenience culture, aren't politicians or activists. They're regular people who just got tired. Tired of feeling bad, tired of being unhealthy, tired of the emptiness that comes with constant convenience. And they're starting to build alternatives, starting to imagine a different way, and that's where our journey takes us next. Something unexpected started happening in the mid-2000s. While fast food chains continued their march toward total market dominance, a small but determined group of people began saying no. Not just no to fast food occasionally, but no to everything it represents. Speed over quality, efficiency over experience, convenience over connection. These people weren't health fanatics or political radicals. They were ordinary folks, chefs, farmers, teachers, parents, who'd simply had enough. They looked at what fast food had done to their communities, their bodies, their cultures, and decided to build something different. Tonight we're exploring the resistance movement, the people who are fighting back against fast food culture. And we need to ask ourselves, can they win? Or are they just nostalgic dreamers fighting an inevitable future? The movement has a birthday. November 9th, 1986. That's the day Carlo Petrini, an Italian food writer and activist, stood in front of a McDonald's being built near the Spanish Steps in Rome and declared war. He called it the slow food movement, and the name itself was a direct challenge to everything fast food represented. Carlo wasn't against McDonald's specifically, though he certainly didn't like it. He was against the entire philosophy of fast food, the industrialization of eating, the standardization of taste, the destruction of regional food traditions in favor of global sameness. He wanted to preserve traditional cooking methods, local ingredients, and the cultural knowledge that had been passed down for generations. He wanted meals to be slow, intentional, meaningful, an experience rather than a transaction, and people responded. Within a few years, slow food had chapters in dozens of countries. tens of thousands of members. It became a global movement dedicated to good, clean and fair food. Good meant delicious and quality. Clean meant produced sustainably without harming the environment. Fair meant respecting the people who grew and cooked it, paying them properly, valuing their labor. These weren't radical concepts. They were just a return to how food had worked for most of human history before industrial agriculture and fast food chains changed everything. But in the context of late 20th century food culture, they felt revolutionary, counter-cultural even, because slow food was asking people to do something that modern life had trained them not to do. Slow down, pay attention, about where food comes from and how it's made. But slow food was philosophical, idealistic. It provided a framework for thinking differently about food, but it didn't provide practical alternatives for most people. That's where farm-to-table restaurants came in. Starting in the 2000s, a new type of restaurant began appearing in American cities. Small places, often run by young chefs, that sourced ingredients directly from local farms. The menus changed daily based on what was in season. Nothing was processed. Nothing came from a corporate supplier. Everything was fresh, local, and made from scratch. These restaurants were expensive, sure. You couldn't get a meal for $5 like at McDonald's, but the people eating there weren't just paying for food. They were paying for a statement, a rejection of industrial food systems, a connection to place and season and craft. And interestingly, these restaurants became incredibly popular, not despite being the opposite of fast food, but because they were the opposite of fast food. People were hungry for something real, something authentic, something that felt like it mattered. Then came the farmers' market renaissance. Farmers' markets aren't new, obviously. They've existed for thousands of years, but in America they'd nearly disappeared by the 1970s, replaced by supermarkets and fast food. But starting in the 90s and exploding in the 2000s, farmers' markets came back. By 2019, there were over 8,000 farmers' markets operating in the United States. 8,000. People were driving past supermarkets to buy vegetables directly from farmers, paying more for food that was less convenient. Why? Because they wanted to know where their food came from. They wanted to meet the people who grew it. They wanted tomatoes that tasted like tomatoes instead of the flavourless, perfectly round, genetically identical tomatoes bred for long-distance shipping. They wanted connection, seasonality, realness, and they were willing to pay a premium and accept inconvenience to get it. And here's something fascinating. The farm-to-table movement and farmers' markets attracted a specific demographic: college-educated, middle to upper income, politically progressive. In other words, people with resources, people who could afford to pay more for food and had time to shop at farmers' markets. And critics jumped on this, calling it elitism, saying that eating local and organic was a luxury that most people couldn't afford, that it was virtue signaling by wealthy people who wanted to feel superior. And there's some truth to that criticism. Sustainable, ethical food is more expensive. It does require resources that many people don't have. But here's what I think the critics miss. These movements had to start somewhere, and they started with people who had the privilege to choose differently. But the goal was never to stay elite. The goal was to prove that alternative food systems could work, could be profitable, could feed people well, and then scale them to reach everyone. That hasn't happened yet. But it's the aspiration. Now let's talk about something that made fast food companies genuinely nervous. Fast casual restaurants. These are chains like Chipotle, Panera Bread, and Sweetgreen that position themselves as healthier, higher quality alternatives to traditional fast food. They use the efficiency and scalability of fast food, assembly line preparation, limited menus, quick service, but combine it with better ingredients. No frozen food, no microwaves, visible kitchens where you can watch your meal being prepared. And it worked. Chipotle, founded in 1993, grew to over 3,000 locations. Their marketing emphasized food with integrity, responsibly raised meat, organic produce when possible, and people, especially younger people, responded enthusiastically. Suddenly you could get a fast meal that didn't feel like junk food. That felt healthier, more ethical, more aligned with your values. Fast casual proved that you could have convenience without completely sacrificing quality. It was a middle ground, a compromise, and it scared traditional fast food chains because it showed that people, when given a choice, would choose something better. McDonald's and other fast food giants responded by trying to compete. They added salads, oatmeal, apple slices, grilled chicken. They talked about transparency and sustainability, but it always felt defensive, reactive. They were making changes because they had to, not because they wanted to, and customers could tell the difference. The salad at McDonald's felt like an afterthought. The salad at Sweetgreen felt like the point. That distinction mattered. It created brand identity. Sweetgreen customers felt good about eating there. McDonald's customers felt guilty, or at least less good. And over time, that emotional difference translated into market share. Young, health-conscious consumers started choosing fast casual over traditional fast food. Not always, but often enough to hurt. Then there's the plant-based food revolution. Companies like Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods created burger patties made entirely from plants that somehow tasted remarkably similar to real meat. This was a game changer, because one of the biggest environmental and ethical problems with fast food is meat. Beef production generates enormous carbon emissions. It requires vast amounts of water and land. It involves animal suffering. But Americans love hamburgers. So environmentalists and animal rights activists had been trying for decades to convince people to eat less meat. And it wasn't working. People liked meat too much. But plant-based burgers offered a different approach. You don't have to give up burgers, you just have to eat burgers made from plants. And if they taste good enough, why not? Burger King started selling the Impossible Whopper. McDonald's tested the McPlant. Suddenly, plant-based eating wasn't fringe, it was mainstream, available at fast food restaurants, and the market exploded. By 2021, the plant-based meat industry was worth over $7 billion and growing rapidly. But here's where it gets complicated. Are plant-based burgers actually better? Environmentally, yes, absolutely. They produce far less carbon emissions than beef. Ethically, if you care about animal welfare, yes. But health-wise, that's murkier. A plant-based burger is still highly processed. It's still full of sodium and fat, it's still fast food. So you've solved the environmental problem, but not necessarily the health problem. And some critics argue that plant-based meat is just another industrial food product designed to maximize profit. That it's not really different from the processed meat it's replacing. It's still engineered, still manufactured, still optimized for shelf life and profitability rather than nutrition. So is it progress, or is it just a different version of the same problem? I honestly don't know, but I do think it represents something important. An acknowledgement that the way we've been producing and consuming meat isn't sustainable, that something has to change, and plant-based meat is one possible change, even if it's not perfect. Let me tell you about a more radical response. Food waste awareness. Activists started highlighting just how much food fast food restaurants and consumers waste. In America, roughly 30 to 40% of all food produced is wasted. 30 to 40%. That's hundreds of billions of pounds of food thrown away every year. And fast food contributes significantly to this. Portions too large to finish. Food prepared but not sold, thrown out at closing time. packaging designed for single use that immediately becomes trash. Activists started dumpster diving behind fast food restaurants and documenting perfectly good food being thrown away while people in the same city were going hungry. The videos went viral. People were outraged. How can we waste this much when so many people don't have enough? And that awareness created pressure. Some cities passed laws requiring restaurants to donate unsold food instead of trashing it. Some restaurants changed policies. It wasn't a revolution, but it was progress, small, incremental, but real. There has also been a municipal pushback against fast food that's worth discussing. Minneapolis banned the construction of new drive-thrus in 2019, citing environmental concerns and a desire to create more walkable neighborhoods. Other cities followed. Some cities banned fast food restaurants from opening near schools to protect children from aggressive marketing. Some implemented zoning restrictions to limit fast food density in certain neighborhoods. These policies are controversial. Opponents argue it's government overreach, that people should be free to eat what they want, that limiting fast food access hurts business owners. But proponents argue that cities have a responsibility to promote public health, that unrestricted fast food access creates obesogenic environments that make people sick, and that some regulation is necessary. Who's right? Probably both. It's complicated. But what's clear is that some communities are no longer willing to accept unlimited fast food expansion. They are fighting back, using policy, using law, saying not in our neighborhood, not near our schools, not without restrictions, and then there's the generational shift. Gen Z, people born after 1997, has a very different relationship with fast food than their parents. They are more health conscious, more environmentally aware, more skeptical of corporate marketing. They're the generation that grew up with smartphone food tracking apps, with constant health information, with climate change as an undeniable reality, and they're making different choices. Studies show that Gen Z eats fast food less frequently than millennials or Gen X. They're more likely to cook at home, more likely to choose plant-based options, more likely to pay attention to sourcing and sustainability. They are not boycotting fast food entirely, but they're treating it differently, with more skepticism, more intentionality, and this generational shift has fast food companies worried. Because if the next generation doesn't develop the same loyalty, the same habits, the same addictions that previous generations had, the entire business model starts to crumble. Let me share something personal. I've talked to dozens of people for this story, and one conversation particularly moved me. A woman named Maria, 55 years old, told me about her journey away from fast food. She'd eaten it her whole life, several times a week. Her kids grew up on Happy Meals. It was just normal. But then her husband had a heart attack at age 52, survived, thankfully. But it was a wake-up call. The doctors said his diet was a major factor. Too much salt, too much fat, too much processed food. So Maria decided to change everything. She learned to cook, really cook from scratch. She started shopping at farmers markets, growing vegetables in her backyard. She stopped buying fast food entirely. And here's what she told me. She said, "At first it was hard, really hard. I didn't know how to cook. I was spending so much more time in the kitchen. But then something changed. I started enjoying it. The cooking, the planning, the growing. And meals with my family became different. We started talking more, connecting more, and I realized we'd lost that. We'd been so focused on convenience that we'd forgotten what meals were supposed to be. Now, 5 years later, she hasn't eaten fast food once, doesn't even miss it, and her husband is healthy. They're both healthy, and happier, she says, than they've been in decades. Maria's story isn't unique. There are thousands, maybe millions of people who've made similar journeys. away from convenience, toward intentionality, away from fast food, toward real food. And each of these individual choices, while small, collectively represents a challenge to the fast food industry. Because the industry's power comes from ubiquity, from being the default, from convenience being irresistible. But if enough people start resisting, if enough people decide that convenience isn't worth the cost, the whole system starts to shift. We're not there yet, not close. Fast food is still dominant, still growing, still profitable, but the cracks are visible, the resistance is real, and it's growing. The question is, can this movement scale? Can it reach beyond educated, wealthy, urban consumers to become truly universal? Can it compete with the billions of dollars fast food companies spend on marketing? Can it overcome the structural realities that make fast food the easiest choice for so many people? I don't know, but I'm hopeful, because change always starts small, with individuals making different choices, with communities supporting each other, with new models proving that alternatives are possible. The slow food movement, farm-to-table restaurants, farmers' markets, fast casual chains, plant-based meat, municipal regulations, generational shifts. Each of these is a seed, and seeds, given time and care, can grow, can spread, can eventually transform the landscape. But the resistance isn't just about rejecting fast food, it's about imagining what comes next. What kind of food system do we want? What do we want eating to look like in 20, 50, 100 years? Because fast food showed us one possible future. Fast, cheap, convenient, global, standardized. But there are other futures, slower futures, more local, more diverse, more connected to land and season and culture. And the resistance movement is trying to build those futures. Not by destroying fast food, you can't uninvent convenience, but by creating compelling alternatives. By showing that there are other ways to eat, other ways to live, and that those other ways might actually be better, not easier, but better, more nourishing, more meaningful, more human. And that brings us to the final question. Where do we go from here? We've travelled a long road together tonight, from the first White Castle in 1921 to delivery apps in 2025, from 5-cent hamburgers to $60 billion tech companies, from small innovation to global revolutions. We've seen how fast food changed everything, how we eat, how we work, how we relate to each other, how cultures evolve, how bodies function. And now we're at a crossroads. Fast food isn't going away, but it's also not the inevitable future it once seemed. We have choices, collectively and individually, about what we eat, how we eat, why we eat, and those choices will shape not just the food industry but society itself. So let's talk about the future. Let's imagine what comes next, because the story isn't over, it's just beginning. The year is 2025. Somewhere in Silicon Valley, engineers are programming a robot to flip burgers with perfect consistency. In Singapore, scientists are growing chicken meat in bioreactors, no animal required. In Paris, a 3-star Michelin chef is experimenting with 3D printed desserts. And in your pocket, an app is analysing your DNA to recommend the perfect meal based on your genetic makeup. The future of food is being written right now in laboratories and startups and test kitchens around the world, and it looks nothing like the past. Tonight, as we close this journey, we are going to peer into that future. We are going to see where fast food is headed. And we're going to ask ourselves the most important question of all. Not where is it going, but where do we want it to go? Because the future isn't fixed, it's not inevitable. It's a choice. And that choice belongs to all of us. Let's start with something that's already happening. Robot kitchens. In California, a company called Creator built a restaurant where robots do everything. A robot slices the tomatoes. A robot toasts the bun. A robot assembles the burger. No human hands touch the food from raw ingredients to finished product. The company claims this makes food safer, more consistent and cheaper to produce, and they're not alone. Dozens of companies are developing automated cooking systems. McDonald's has been testing automated fryers. Domino's has experimented with pizza-making robots. In China, some restaurants are almost entirely automated. You order on a screen, robots cook your meal, and a mechanical arm delivers it to your table. No servers, no cooks, just machines executing algorithms. And this raises profound questions. If robots can cook as well as humans, maybe better because they never get tired or distracted. What happens to the millions of people who work in food service? What happens to the craft of cooking? Does food become just another manufactured product like phones or cars? And would that be progress, or would we lose something essential? But there's another technological revolution happening that might be even more significant. Lab-grown meat. Scientists can now take a small sample of cells from an animal, place them in a nutrient bath, and grow meat without raising or slaughtering any animals. It's real meat, biologically identical, but produced in a facility instead of a farm. The first lab-grown burger was created in 2013 and cost $300,000 to produce. But the cost has plummeted. By 2025, several companies are producing lab-grown chicken, beef, and pork at prices approaching conventional meat. And if this technology scales, if it becomes cheaper than traditional meat production, it could change everything. Imagine fast food with no environmental impact from livestock, no animal suffering, no risk of diseases like mad cow or salmonella. The same taste, the same texture, but produced cleanly and efficiently in controlled environments. That's not science fiction. That's 5 to 10 years away. Maybe less. And then there's personalized nutrition. Your smartphone already tracks your steps and your heart rate. But imagine if it also tracked everything you ate, analyzed your genetic markers, monitored your microbiome, and used artificial intelligence to recommend exactly what you should eat for optimal health. Not generic advice, but personalized guidance based on your unique biology. Some fast food chains are already experimenting with this. They're developing systems where you scan your phone, the restaurant accesses your health data with your permission, and suggests menu items optimized for your body. Maybe you need more iron. The system recommends a burger with spinach. Maybe you're pre-diabetic. The system suggests a low-carb option. This could revolutionize nutrition, or it could be incredibly creepy and invasive, probably both. But it's coming. The question is how we regulate it, how we protect privacy, how we ensure it serves people rather than just corporations gathering more data to sell more products. Let me tell you about something happening right now that fascinates me. Virtual restaurants. These exist only online. They have no physical location you can visit. They're just brands, menus, and marketing that exist on delivery apps. When you order, the food is prepared in a ghost kitchen by workers who might be cooking for 5 different virtual brands simultaneously. And here's the weird part. Some of these virtual brands are owned by algorithms. Artificial intelligence analyzes data on what people order, what ingredients are cheapest, what cuisines are trending, and generated restaurant concepts designed to maximize profitability. No human creativity, no chef's vision, just optimization. And these algorithmic restaurants are successful because they're designed based on what people actually order, rather than what chefs think people should want. It's pure data-driven capitalism, and it's either the future or a dystopian nightmare. Depends on your perspective. But not all futures are about technology. Some are about returning to older ways. In Detroit, a movement called urban farming is transforming abandoned lots into vegetable gardens. In Brooklyn, rooftop farms are growing produce for local restaurants. In cities across America, people are turning empty spaces into food-producing landscapes. And this isn't small scale. Some urban farms produce thousands of pounds of vegetables annually. They're proving that cities don't have to be food deserts. That fresh local food can be grown even in dense urban environments, and they were creating jobs, building community, teaching skills, and providing nutrition in neighborhoods that have been neglected by the conventional food system. This is slow food meets urban planning, and it's working. Not everywhere, not yet at scale, but it's a model, a glimpse of a different future. There's also a growing movement towards what's called food sovereignty. The idea that communities should control their own food systems rather than being dependent on global supply chains and corporate control. Indigenous communities are reclaiming traditional foods and growing methods. Local communities are starting cooperatives. People are saving seeds and sharing them freely rather than buying patented, genetically modified seeds from corporations. This is fundamentally political. It's about power, about who controls food. And it's a direct challenge to the industrial food system that fast food represents. Will it succeed? Can it scale? I don't know, but the fact that people are trying, that they're organizing and resisting and building alternatives, that matters, because it shows that the future isn't predetermined, it's contested, and people are fighting for the future they want to see. Now, let's talk about something uncomfortable. Sugar taxes and health regulations. Several cities and countries have implemented taxes on sugary drinks. Mexico, Berkeley, California, Philadelphia, the UK. And the evidence shows these taxes work. When soda costs more, people buy less of it. Consumption drops, particularly among lower-income populations and children, and that translates to better health outcomes. But these taxes are controversial. Critics call them regressive, arguing they hurt poor people who spend a larger percentage of their income on food. Proponents argue that poor people also suffer disproportionately from diabetes and obesity, so helping them consume less sugar is actually progressive. Who's right? Both. It's complicated. But what's clear is that some governments are no longer willing to let market forces alone determine what people eat. They're intervening, and that intervention will likely increase. More taxes, more restrictions, more regulations. Whether that's good depends on whether you trust government to make decisions about what you should eat, and Americans historically don't. But as healthcare costs spiral and obesity rates climb, that calculus might change. Let me paint two possible futures, two paths we could take. In the first future, technology solves everything. Robot kitchens make food production incredibly efficient and cheap. Lab-grown meat eliminates the environmental and ethical problems of livestock. Personalized nutrition means everyone eats exactly what their body needs. Food waste drops to near zero because AI predicts demand perfectly. Delivery apps evolve into comprehensive food management systems that handle everything from grocery shopping to meal planning to cooking. And fast food, if it still exists, is healthy, sustainable, and personalized. It's the techno-optimist future, the Silicon Valley future, where innovation and markets solve all problems, and maybe that's how it goes. Maybe technology really does make everything better. But there's a second possible future, one where we reject the logic of efficiency and convenience, where we choose slowness, where we rebuild local food systems, support small farmers, cook in our homes, eat with our families and friends, where food becomes sacred again, a connection to land and season and community rather than a transaction optimized for profit, where we accept that good food takes time and effort and costs more, but we decide that's worth it because health and connection and culture matter more than convenience. It's the romantic future, the agrarian future, the past reimagined for modern times. And maybe that's how it goes. Maybe people get tired of algorithms and apps and choose something more human. The truth, of course, is that the future will probably be some messy combination of both. Some people will use robot kitchens and eat lab-grown meat. Others will shop at farmers' markets and cook from scratch. Most people will do both, depending on the day and their mood and their circumstances. The future will be plural, diverse. Not one path, but many paths existing simultaneously. And that's probably good, because there's no single solution that works for everyone. A single parent working 2 jobs needs different options than a wealthy retiree. A person in rural Montana needs different options than someone in Manhattan. Food systems have to be flexible enough to serve everyone, and maybe that's the real lesson of fast food. It served a need. It solved real problems for real people: hunger, time scarcity, affordability. The mistake wasn't fast food existing. The mistake was letting it become the only option, the default, the expectation. If we can build a future with many options, many food systems coexisting, then fast food can be one choice among many rather than the dominant paradigm. And that would be progress. But here's what I keep coming back to. Food is never just food. It's always about more. It's about culture and identity, power and economics, health and environment, tradition and innovation, connection and isolation. Every time we eat, we're participating in systems we didn't choose, shaped by forces we don't control. But we're also making choices. Small choices that, accumulated across millions of people, shape those systems and forces. What we buy, what we cook, what we demand, what we refuse. These choices matter. They always have, and they always will. So where do we go from here? I think we go toward consciousness, toward awareness, toward making choices intentionally rather than automatically. We can eat fast food without letting it eat us. We can use technology without being used by it. We can enjoy convenience without worshipping it. We can honor tradition without being imprisoned by it. We can do all of this if we just pay attention, if we think about what we're eating and why, if we ask questions about where our food comes from and how it affects us, if we connect our individual choices to collective consequences. That's not easy. It's actually quite hard in a world designed to make us not think, designed to make consumption automatic and unconscious. But it's possible, and it's necessary. Because the food system we have is the food system we've chosen, whether we realized we were choosing or not. And the food system we'll have in the future will also be chosen. By us, right now, with every meal. The story of fast food is a story about America, about capitalism and innovation, about convenience and consequence, about how we build systems that serve us and then find ourselves serving those systems, about how small changes, 5-cent hamburgers, drive-through windows, franchise manuals can cascade into transformations so complete that we can't imagine life before them. But it's also a story about resistance and creativity, and the stubborn human refusal to accept that the way things are is the way they must be. People fought back, built alternatives, imagined different futures, and they're still doing that today, still fighting, still building, still imagining. We've covered a lot of ground tonight, from White Castle in 1921 to delivery apps in 2025, from Walt Anderson's 5-hole burger to lab-grown meat, from Ronald McDonald to robot kitchens. 100 years of history, billions of meals, trillions of dollars, millions of lives changed, for better and worse, and through it all, one constant. Human hunger, not just for food, but for connection, for meaning, for something more than just getting through the day. Fast food promised to satisfy that hunger with speed and efficiency and convenience, and it delivered on that promise, but it couldn't deliver on the deeper hunger. The hunger for purpose and community and health and joy, that hunger remains, and maybe, just maybe, that's where the future takes us. Back towards satisfying the whole hunger, not just the part that can be solved with a hamburger and fries. Thank you for staying with me through this long journey. Thank you for listening, for thinking, for engaging with these questions that don't have easy answers. I hope this story has given you something to think about, something to discuss with friends over a meal, whatever kind of meal you choose, and I hope it's reminded you that you have power, the power to choose, the power to demand better, the power to build the future you want to see. Food connects us all. Every single human needs to eat, and how we eat together shapes the world we live in. So let's shape it wisely. Let's shape it consciously. Let's shape it with care. This is just one story among many. History is full of them. Stories about how we live, how we change, how we struggle to be better than we were. And I'll be back soon with another story, another journey into the strange, fascinating, complicated history that made our modern world. Until then, take care of yourselves. Eat well. And remember, the future isn't fixed. It's a choice, and the choice is yours. Good night.